Shippensburg. Workers Independent News we can review.
For Doug Cunningham, I'm Joanne Powers. The International Labor Organization Committee on the Application of Standards collapsed this week at the International Labor Conference, ending today in Geneva. Representatives of business at the ILO refused to endorse the committee's findings on a range of serious cases involving major labor violations. Jeffrey Vogt, legal advisor to the International Trade Union Confederation, says that since 2012, the employers have tried to disrupt the way the ILO functions by insisting that the right to strike does not exist at the international level.
They're trying to undermine the ILO generally by saying that its expert interpretations on a whole range of conventions are incorrect, but doing it is going to disrupt the oversight of cases on some of the worst labor violators in the world.
For decades, ILO Convention 87 has been consistently interpreted by experts within the ILO as guaranteeing the right to strike.
Their arguments are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of freedom of association and the entire international legal framework in which the ILOs work. There's very well settled that a right to strike does exist as part of ILO Convention on Freedom of Association, and to argue otherwise is wishful thinking on their part.
The United States is one of the few countries that has not ratified ILO Convention 87. The world's producers announced Thursday that they have a formal agreement with unionized South African miners that could end the longest and costliest mining strike in the country's history. 80,000 members of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union walked off the job in January, demanding a basic minimum wage increase of more than double for underground workers. The strike has crippled South Africa's economy, costing mining companies more than $2 billion in lost revenue. The union is putting the agreement to its members, and it is not yet clear if they will accept the proposed offer. A July 10th determination from the Commerce Department could have serious implications for whether or not steel workers will retain family-supporting union jobs around the country. America's steel manufacturers and workers have joined forces to fight back against dumped imports of steel pipe used in the natural gas reserves. The Alliance for American Manufacturing, a partnership between the United Steelworkers and leading steel manufacturers, is calling for a thorough investigation of steel imports from South Korea being dumped on the U.S. market below cost. Scott Paul, president of the AAM.
They will always have disagreements, but they agreed that having a focus on the importance of manufacturing and good-paying jobs to our domestic economy was something that made a lot of sense. And we find that elected officials have nowhere to run when you bring in both the business side and the labor side to talk about a set of issues like we do. I think we've at least woken up the White House and Congress as to how important this is. Getting them to do something is another story.
AAM has been holding a nationwide series of Save Our Steel Jobs rallies. Learn more at AmericanManufacturing.org.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from Union-Owned Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, doing whatever it takes to meet your business lending needs for new construction, remodeling, or building training facilities. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News provided by Diversified Media Enterprises.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the program. Lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. Oh, boy, do we have lots of things. Before we get into that, tomorrow, Saturday morning, get up a little early, 8:30 to noon at Dickinson College, Penn State School of Law, 333 West South Street there in Carlisle. Big panel. The folks at Building Common Ground PA, they're having a workshop. Come out, little education, little activism, little engagement, good stuff. Community people coming out, talking to each other about important issues. And the reason I bring it up, why I think it's so important, I'm going to be there. They've asked me to be one of the panelists on why why unions are so important to Pennsylvania. And, I was honored to be asked about it, and I think it's one of these issues that's extraordinarily important. But what I found interesting is when I had mentioned it to a couple of people, they're like, "Well, why? Why would they want to talk about that?" And I'm going, because a lot of people, especially a lot of sane, rational people, understand there's got to be a balance of power. There's got to be a way for workers to share in the wealth they create. And I was talking to my daughter at breakfast this morning about, she's going, "Really, you're going to be on another one of these panels? Can I come watch?" Because she's always enamored by the fact that I get to go up on stage and talk to people. And it's one of those things, it builds the ego a little bit, even though I'm not, I don't think I'm a narcissist or an egomaniac. But it's good for it's good for her to see that you can step forward and make a difference, and that people's thoughts and ideas matter, because generally these things are always very well received, and I'm always taken by the questions and the thoughtfulness that goes into some of these face-to-face debates. Now, the email stuff I get from people is kind of crazy, but actually talking face-to-face to people, really very, very, very powerful. So tomorrow, I hope a lot of people come out. It's 8:30 to noon at Dickinson College, Penn State School of Law, 333 West South Street there in Carlisle. Right that nice building right on the corner of South Street and I think that's College Street, right? So right there. Now, for my part in it, because I thought I would start the show, I'm kind of just working through my thoughts on this, because I've been asked to talk, why is it important? And I can only talk about it from my perspective, which in my life and in the lives of the families that I've known, why it's been so important. I think back to my grandparents, who, when my grandfather during the Depression was working on the back of a coal truck, shoveling coal off the back of a truck into people's houses, into their coal bins, because that's how we used to do it. He was making 7 cents an hour during the Depression, and cheated half the time on his wages. And I remember him telling me these stories of how things used to be. And I've been very fortunate, and I've talked about this quite a lot on the program over the years, that I've had the opportunity to talk to people who were years ahead of me. My mother worked in a nursing home for years, where I spent an awful lot of time talking with people who were, they were forgotten. They were left in these nursing homes, and there was really nobody for them to talk to. So when I came from after school, they were just thrilled to share their lives with me. And those are days and moments that I cherish, because it gives me I think a much richer insight to what the past looked like. Not just what I read in a book, not just what's been put in front of me, but actual stories and actual people's lives and what they experienced. And my grandfather, fortunately did the same thing. When I became more active in my union, when I was a Teamster, and got into organizing and got into other endeavors, he spent a lot of time saying, this is how things used to be. These are the fights that we went through. These are the cracked skulls and the beatings in the streets and all of the fighting and the battles and the bloodshed that went into creating a middle class. And he was very emphatic in saying that your generation's going to lose it. Your generation is where all of that stuff goes away. The question, he says, is how fast? And at the time, I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember the conversations like it was yesterday, because the Detroit newspaper strikes were going on, where the Sterling Heights Police Department was literally clubbing people in the streets, beating them bloody in the streets with batons and shooting water cannons at them. And these are workers who are just saying, you know what? We just want to make a decent wage. And I remember the conversations back. This is the mid to early mid 90s. And he was saying all of this stuff's being taken away, systematically taken away. And it's your job to fight for it. Because he was thrilled that I was becoming a union organizer and becoming more active because of the fights that he saw. He said, look, you don't think that the employers just gave decent wages, do you? You don't think they just gave health care. You don't think they just gave retirement security. You don't think they just gave this stuff out of the goodness of their heart, out of their benevolence. And the truth of the matter is, no, I never believed that. Every step forward for working people has come at the price of bloodshed. Every step forward has come at the price of pain and suffering and misery for working people. And the biggest canard, the biggest lie sold to working people is that we're a classless society. And I think I've told the story a number of times. In the early 70s, I think my grandfather told me it was. Well, where he had my grandmother wanted to go to one of these fancy restaurants. She wanted to go to see one of the live plays. The classless society. So my grandfather saved up, took her to one of the swanky hotel dinner places, got reservations, saved up for months, mind you, in the classless society. Got there early, good working class ethic, showed up early. As he was being seated, his boss comes in, no reservation, had to wait. So while my grandfather and my grandmother are dining, he sees his boss. Not happy, not pleased at all. As they're leaving, the boss gets seated. They go over to the play, plenty of time, they're early, they sit, they enjoy the beginning. There's 2 seats next to them open. And you know where this is going. I mean, it's just how things seem to work. And he said the lights went down and all of a sudden you heard the commotion. And there came the boss and his wife, tripping over people to get to their seats, causing a commotion. And he said it was right then that I knew. All of this movement towards a classless society, all of this movement to get working people to be able to enjoy some of the finer things was going to be destroyed. And little did he know. Now look, here's a guy who didn't even finish 8th grade. But he knew instinctively that there was going to be pushback. He didn't know at the time. It was all the wheels were already in place and things were already moving. The money was being spent to build the infrastructure. The money was being spent to take over education, to take over the media, to take over every facet of our lives, to save the free enterprise capitalist model from those commies, those socialists, those heathens, those workers. And what's gone on over the years is what they've done is they've gotten us to think in this, that it's classless society. And those unions are bad things. Something we needed 100 years ago when things were really bad. And they've got us to buy this. Now, the stories my grandfather told me of wage theft, the stories my grandfather told me of at-will employment, the stories that he told me of bad conditions and poor treatment, welcome back, because here we are. It's not as blatant as it was. It's not as wide open, but it's as widespread. When you look at the fast food industry, where the survey in New York said that 80% of the people surveyed in the last year had experienced some form of wage theft, you have a major problem. And as I think about what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, that all plays into this, because we are reliving the past. My kids are going to fight the exact same fights my grandparents' generation had to fight. It's undeniable. And, as I think it was Thomas Paine who said, if there must be trouble, let it be now. Let it be at this time of my generation so that my children are spared. And that's where we need to be waking up to the realization that the things that we're being force-fed, all of this this pro-corporate, we need more tax cuts for the rich, we need more deregulation, we need less of those unions and less of those teachers unions and less of those public sector unions, less of those people with voices. We need less of those. We need to be very careful about the messages that we're allowing to saturate our ears. Because what's going on is we're going back to the days that my grandfather fought for, that he fought in. And all of that work that the greatest generation did, all of that community, all of that fighting on the shop floor, all for naught. And that's really a sad thing. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Pennsylvania State Representative Mike Sterla. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for The World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The work week has come to a close, but it's decision time in Baghdad and Washington, and perhaps Tehran, as military planners try and think up a way to prevent Iraq from slipping into the hands of terrorists. After months of worsening violence, a group called ISIL, or the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant, captured the cities of Mosul and Tikrit this week. The U.S. spent $25 billion training the Iraqi armed forces over the past decade, but in remarks today, President Barack Obama blamed their courage and the lack of focus among Iraq's leaders for the army's poor performance.
The fact that they are not willing to stand and fight and defend their posts against admittedly hardened terrorists, but not terrorists who are overwhelming in numbers, indicates that there's a problem with morale.
Given these issues, it's become clear that outside help will be needed to make a stand against ISIL. The U.S. is reportedly moving the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, which could be a sign the Pentagon is considering airstrikes. But Obama said today he'll need time to ponder his broader strategy.
Although events on the ground in Iraq have been happening very quickly, our ability to plan, whether it's military action or work with the Iraqi government on some of these political issues, is going to take several days. So people should not anticipate that this is something that is going to happen overnight.
According to media reports, the Iraqi government is said to be considering a military appeal to Iran if U.S. assistance doesn't materialize. The ironies of foreign policy. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
What keeps you up at night, Governor? What part of all of those worries concerns you the most? The cuts, the tax hikes?
Well, usually I wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I wonder where we are going to balance the budget. We have a pension crisis, just like every other state just about has a pension crisis.
But you've had success. I want our viewers to know you've balanced 2 previous budgets, if not more. Right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you've closed deficit holes of more than $4 billion. You've had success.
Yes, you've had success. Yeah, I guess the key being what exactly is success is gutting $1 billion each of the last couple of years from public education. Is that success? Are 2 children in the Philadelphia school district dying at school because there's no school nurse there? Is that success? Is kicking thousands, 41,000 people off adult basic? Is that success? I got to tell you, I don't know what that can handle. I don't think our Commonwealth can handle much more success if that's the definition. And I understand, budget coming up. I mean, we're only days away. I mean, today's the 13th. You're looking at the end of the month, not too far away, and not much movement on it. I understand this week the Republicans have finally reported out of the House Appropriations Committee something that might be considered like last year's budget. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked Pennsylvania State Representative Mike Sterler to come talk with us. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks.
So finally, something of a budget to be considered, something to look at here. We're just kind of days away, right?
Well, the budget that came out of the Appropriations Committee the other day, even the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee said it was really just a vehicle. It had no semblance of what a real bill needed to be. It did not cover the payments that are needed for this year. It was last year's budget bill, essentially, for this year's budget, and doesn't take into consideration increased debt service and things like that that's necessary.
So we're basically just kind of mailing it in at this point. And
it was moving a vehicle so that if they ever figure out what it is they're going to do, there's at least a vehicle to run it in.
Okay, there's some. I got to give it credit, at least some thought, because we're not too far away from the end of the month. Is it possible we're going to maybe not see a budget on time like we did in last year?
Well, they claim they're going to pass a budget one way or the other, which in one sense is kind of scary because, on Monday we'll go back, there'll be 15 days left, and the idea that they don't know what might be in a budget that's got a $1.3 billion shortfall 15 days out is a pretty scary prospect. And I don't think you can find 2 people in Harrisburg that agree on what ought to be in the budget 15 days from now. So that part of it's also pretty scary. So my guess is they'll cobble something together and see if they can run it up the flag and get enough votes and bludgeon enough people to pass anything, essentially.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I don't see very many good things for education. I don't see very many good things for low-wage workers. I see more pain and suffering, as we've seen in the last several budgets. More bludgeoning the already downtrodden, and, well, we'll take care of the folks at the top, I think.
Yeah, from my understanding, the House Republicans have said they have 102 votes for a budget that cuts $1.3 billion more than was already cut over the last 3.5 years. And
how is that possible? How is that possible?
You just got programs, essentially. And look, their first budget that they claimed was balanced was $400 million out of balance, and they just gave the Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare carte blanche to make $400 million in cuts. They admitted that they didn't know where the cuts needed to be made or how they could be made, but they balanced it by saying there were $400 worth of cuts there, or $400 million worth of cuts there that were going to get made. And the way the Secretary of Welfare did that in that first budget was to basically send everybody a letter and say, you don't qualify for your program anymore unless you reapply. And so most people said, well, gosh, I guess I don't qualify anymore. Or the ones that did believe they still qualified reapplied but didn't get their benefits for another month. So they at least got a month's worth of free, no payment on benefits for that month.
That's just plain wrong.
And that's how they've been, right from the get-go. That's the way they've been piecing together budgets for the last couple of years. And as a result, Standard & Poor's sent a letter to the governor and the leaders of all 4 caucuses this year and said, if you continue with these one-time budget gimmicks, we will downgrade your credit rating as a state because it's not sustainable and it is not good business practice.
And that's the thing. You look at when this governor took office, we were fairly high up on the job creation.
Right, 7th in job creation. We then fell to 49th. We're back up to 39th, which is nothing to brag about. You know, and part of that's just that people have stopped looking for jobs, so the unemployment rate looks like it's improved, but that's because people's unemployment benefits ran out, so they aren't qualified as unemployed anymore.
Yeah, exactly what I said was going to happen back after Christmas when in Washington the Republicans ran home without extending federal unemployment benefits. It was part of the plan. Come summertime, all of these people are going to be off the unemployment rolls, and it's going to look like, hey, things are much better. Things are rosy just in time for election time.
Right.
So what should we be doing, Mike? I mean, I have a lot of ideas. Close the Delaware loophole, maybe tax the drillers no less than what West Virginia does. There's a lot of ideas out there to do this the right way, no?
Yeah, there's multiple ideas. I mean, for starters, let's freeze corporate giveaways. Let's stop lowering corporate taxes. Every year this governor has been in office, he has lowered corporate taxes.
Well, what do you say to the person, Mike? What do you say to the person who says, well, we have to do this, Mike? Mike, we would love to stop giving out the sugar and the sweeteners, but if we don't, New Jersey's going to give them out and steal jobs from us, or Ohio's going to steal from us.
I keep being told that, lower taxes leads to more jobs. And then I say, okay, well, we've lowered taxes 3 years in a row now. How comes we fell from 7th to 39th?
Because we didn't do it enough. If we would make it negative numbers, if we would pay them to work for them.
Other states raised their taxes and had better job growth numbers than we do, because they are on substantially better financial footings, and they're educating their citizens. And businesses say, I want an educated workforce. But if you're not going to educate a workforce, and you're not going to provide, benefits for people that are, struggling, and you're not going to do some of those kinds of things, why do I want to go locate my business there? I mean, this governor has not done, any projects that, back during the Rendell administration, we were doing projects in every city to make it better for, the capital budget projects to make the city and the places people live the better place to live. This governor hasn't done any of that. Yeah. He's basically said, buckle down the hatches, and, we're going to weather the storm here by giving the money away to somebody else and hoping that we can survive.
And that's the hoping part.
Yeah. I think indicative of all of this is last week, Charles Zogby, the budget secretary, said, never did I think that, in the fourth year budget, it would be worse than the first year budget. This is the budget secretary.
Well, what did he think was going to happen? I mean, honestly,
at some point in time, you start saying, "Gee, things aren't going so well for the last couple of years. We better change direction." I mean, look, the governor's campaign slogan is, we're not there yet. Well, if you're headed in the wrong direction, you're never going to get there, and that's basically where we're going in this state, which is why I think we need a change and a drastic change.
And that's why hopefully come November there is that drastic change that we need, especially on the education front. Because look, this guy in no way, shape, or form could be anywhere misconstrued as the education governor. And I've been harping on what's happened in Philadelphia. The school district there is just in shambles. It's been systematically defunded. And if you're one of the two parents of those kids who went to school and the kids got sick and ended up dying, and there not being a nurse anywhere around to help, I got to be honest. I would be. I can't even say what I would be, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the thing, and part of this is, look, everybody wants to pay the lowest amount of tax possible. I understand that. Nobody says just keep taxing me till I'm blue in the face. But there are certain basic services that we expect from government, and this guy has cut beyond that point. People wait months to get a driver's test. People wait months to get somebody to pick up the phone at DPW or, any of the agencies that the state runs, because we've gutted those agencies completely. Yeah. The governor says we're so proud we have less employees now than ever before. What that means is that the waiting lines are longer than ever before.
And he follows that up with the promise kept. So I'm waiting in line longer. I'm getting less service, and I'm still paying the same tax rates.
Right.
See, this is what gets me. Look, Mike, I don't mind paying taxes, and I don't think anyone else really does either if you're getting the value for your money. If the roads are paved, if your kids are getting educated, if you have social safety net programs that nobody collapses when a downturn happens, I think we're okay with that. But when I see this governor giving billions of dollars away in handouts in welfare to these big corporations and them not creating jobs and not doing what they say they were going to do, I have serious problems with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's been the legacy of this governor, and I think it's one of the reasons why he will be a one-term governor. Look, he's going around the state, as well as Republican legislators had voted for all three of his budgets, saying, we've put more money into education than ever before. Well, not if you calculate it the way we have always calculated how much money you put into education. They've now decided that they want to count pension payments in there. Well, gosh, I have to have a road paved in order to get the kids to school. How about if we start, including transportation costs? And, gosh, the kid wouldn't be safe if somebody wasn't locked up in prison. How about if we include prison costs? Now it's even more on education. Well, nobody believes that's education. And so I don't think anybody's buying his line, but nonetheless, he's out there trying to say it because he knows that's what's, hurting him. But it's hurting Pennsylvanians. You can't go into a single school district in this state and say, are the class sizes smaller? Are the test scores better? Are your taxes lower? The answer in every instance is no, no, no. And the response and the reason for that is that this governor cut $1 billion from education. And, there's no two ways around it. Unless you include other items other than education, there's less being spent now on education, even under the governor's proposed budget, than there was in 2009. And the governor's proposed budget is not going to get funded because there's not enough money to fund that.
So then why aren't we doing things? And there's part of me, and you can go off to the edge with me if you want, but there's part of me that thinks that these crises are being created on purpose so that we can sell off our assets. The wine and spirit shops come to mind, the lottery that failed, the turnpike. Just, hey, there's crisis. We've got to sell stuff off to fill these holes. How much of it do you think is that, or how much of it is just plain incompetence?
Well, there's a part of it that I believe is incompetence, but I think a lot of it is sort of this Machiavellian crisis that, as you point out, oh my gosh, we have a pension crisis. The governor knew what his pension payment was this year the day that he took office. We had passed Act 120 in 2010 that told him what that pension payment was going to be this year. I don't know why it was a surprise to him, but 4 years later, he's surprised that he has a pension payment to make this year. Well, that's just because he wasn't paying attention. But, if you create that pension crisis, then you say, oh, we have to do something about the pensions. The bizarre part about it is that even if you change the pension system, which I don't think we need to do, but if you change the pension system, it still doesn't take away the $50 billion, burden that you have. And it doesn't change your pension payment for the next 30 years. In fact, it actually increases your pension payment for the next 30 years because you're running two systems.
Yep.
And so he creates this false, situation where the pensions are killing us, so we need to change the pensions, but doesn't say people, but by changing them, it would actually cost you more.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got another crisis going over here. There's no money. We have to slash education. Well, that's a crisis by choice. You chose not to tax the Marcellus shale drillers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like going to the doctor and saying you got an ingrown toe. Okay, we got to take your leg off at the knee. Basically what he's proposing. So let me ask you a last question then I've got for you, because to me there seem to be a lot of very simple answers here. Medicaid expansion being one of the big ones. There's a lot of money and a lot of jobs that could come along with this that could help solve this problem. Why aren't we doing that?
Ideology, pure ideology. This governor has said he's got a different plan. And, part of his criticism of the expanded Medicaid is that he's not sure that the federal government will actually fund it in future years. And yet his own plan that he proposes is funded by those same Medicaid dollars in future years. So, I mean, that argument is just absolutely bogus. So this really is a stall tactic and nothing else, because at any point in time, you can apply to get a waiver to change the Medicaid system. And so the notion that he can't accept the current Medicaid system because he's trying to get a waiver is just absolutely false. You can accept Medicaid. The governor of New Hampshire has accepted the new Medicaid and or the existing Medicaid expansion, and is applying for a waiver just like Corbett is. Only Corbett said he won't accept the expanded Medicaid until he gets a waiver. Well, again, you're just stalling.
But if you're in an election year and you're going, there's this pot of money here, $600 million I've seen, there's 40,000 jobs I've seen potentially out of this. This would be a huge shot in the arm towards campaign time. This would be, this is how we solve our budget. This is how you become the great hero.
But he has ideologically taken these extreme right-wing positions that, whether it's I'm not going to tax Marcellus Shale, I'm not going to accept Medicaid expansion, I'm going to try and sell off the lottery because if I can privatize it, my seniors will surely be better. It's all about how much of this state can I give away in the 4 years that they have to put up with me.
Well, and that's why come November, let's hope he goes. Mike, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for me. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks.
Pennsylvania State Representative Mike Sterla. Quick break, back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness than fury. No more misery. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Obviously, we came up short.
GOP leader Eric Cantor defeated by climate denier, who doesn't want you to know he's a climate denier. And for good reason.
The argument is not about climate change. The argument is about the best means to respond to climate change.
Australia broils in its hottest 2 years on record, but their prime minister is a global warming skeptic. Historic heat brings riots to India, plus Tesla is giving away its secrets for free.
All of those secrets and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We cannot lose the coal industry, folks. What will we give to naughty kids on Christmas?
This is your Green News Report.
A stocking full of wind? Come on.
Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, big news from Tesla, who says they're giving away their technology to the world for free. The electric car company who makes these fantastic cars. Really?
Yes, they're going open source. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced that his company will, quote, not initiate patent lawsuits against anyone who in good faith wants to use our technology. That means that if other car companies want to produce electric cars, they can use Tesla's technology to do it and advance Musk's dream of electric vehicles everywhere.
That's amazing, actually. I hope others take him up on it, and I hope he can be trusted that he won't sue them when they do.
Yeah.
What else you got for us today?
Well, first, an historic record heat wave in India is bringing the nation to the breaking point, causing rioting over widespread blackouts and hundreds of deaths. Temperatures have held at more than 110 degrees for nearly 3 weeks now in northern India, with some areas hitting 120 degrees. Overnight temperatures in Mumbai this week did not drop below 110 degrees. At midnight.
Wow, and the rioting that comes with it is, again, exactly what not only scientists but defense experts here in the U.S. have been warning us about for so long.
Yeah, that it will lead to unrest. Now, climate scientists say that this heat wave already bears the fingerprint of human-caused global warming. They predict that these extreme temperatures could become the new normal in coming decades. Down under in Australia, they're in the midst of one of their hottest autumns on record in the southern hemisphere, and they just announced that the last 2 years in Australia were Australia's hottest 2 years on record, and that trend is also projected to get worse with global warming. But sorry, Australia, your Conservative Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, is a climate change skeptic who repealed Australia's landmark carbon tax.
I believe that carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes are the wrong way to go. The right way to go is to take sensible steps to improve energy efficiency, to cultivate better soils, to plant more trees, to take the kind of direct action measures which we certainly intend to take in Australia.
Abbott is traveling in the U.S. on his first official visit this week. He says he and Canadian Prime Minister David Cameron are committed to increasing their country's fossil fuel exports, and therefore they oppose any strong international agreement to reduce the carbon emissions that cause global warming.
Yes, anything but charging more money to industry. Nonetheless, in that debate, I think it's a legitimate one. At least he's not out there saying, no, global warming doesn't exist. There's nothing we need to do about it. At least he's recognizing that there's a problem. Now the debate is about what to do about it, which, frankly, is where the debate ought to be.
Yes, but he does favor only voluntary controls for polluting industries, which his own scientists say will do absolutely nothing.
Oh, well, he has the right to be wrong, but, at least he's not crazy.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., in the shocking reported primary election loss of Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor this week, it's no surprise that his Tea Party-backed challenger David Brat is a climate change denier who spouts myths like scientists predicted an ice age in the 1970s, which of course isn't true. Scientists didn't say that.
But Time magazine said so on the cover, so I guess that counts.
But it was never a scientific consensus.
In fact, at the same time, way more scientists had warned about warming rather than cooling back then. But press on.
We'd play you the audio of Brat denying global warming, but once Mother Jones reported on his science denial, all of his YouTube videos were suddenly pulled and set to private. Somebody doesn't want you to know he's a climate science denier.
And why would that be?
Because new public policy polling shows American voters have very little tolerance for denier politicians. A new PPP poll finds not only are President Obama's new carbon emission standards for power plants very popular with the vast majority of Americans, but also the same poll finds more Americans than ever say they won't vote for any presidential candidate in 2016 who doesn't believe that climate change is caused by human activity.
That's a whole lot of people who won't be voting for whoever wins the Republican primary for president in 2016. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we could not get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download us anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, where we hope you'll give us a good review to help other people find us as well. Plus, follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
$25 bill now, $30, $30 bill, give me 30, make it 30 bill, mama, $30 bill, give me 30, who's the $30 bill? $30 bill now, $30
Yes, let's just auction off all our stuff. The crisis is there. We've created it sufficient. They've sold us on, oh my goodness, the pension situation's going to crush us. Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, we've seen this across the country. They created this crisis. Same thing with the education situation. They have created a crisis in education. And I think Mike Sterling is absolutely right. A lot of businesses are going, whoa. You've made a lot of really bad decisions on education. Do I want to think about this for a second. Think about if you're owning a business. Do you really want to take your kids into Philadelphia, into that, and anywhere in that region, given what's going on with that school district? Oh, but Rick, you could send your kid to a charter school. Yeah, 1 in 6 of them are considered high performing. The rest of them, who knows? So tell me again why I think it's a good idea. It's not. What we've done to education is a crime. To me, it's a darn right crime. But it's about creating that crisis. And I do believe the right-wing ideology is about keeping people on edge. Keeping us in that lower tier of Maslow's hierarchy, the fear tier, the want, at the bottom. I can't feed myself next week. So they've created this crisis. And they won't do the things that I think most normal people would do. You know, in the Smith household, when things are tight, I work a couple extra hours. I take on more revenue. You've got to bring more revenue into the house to pay the bills, right? I don't sell off the children's clothing. I don't sell off the car that I'm going to need to get to work in. So what we're seeing, though, is the answer to our problems, and you know this is coming up. You know in the coming days and weeks, we're going to hear an awful lot about selling off the wine and spirit shops. You know this is coming back. When, in fact, what most people really want is they want to make beer a lot more available. And this is where this whole... And I'm glad that it's taken this long, because you're starting to see people really talking about... They weren't talking about this issue until Republicans brought it up. They weren't. I had never had a conversation with anyone who goes, gee, you know, I really wish liquor was more available. I've never heard that. But now that for the last 3 years, the entire governor's tenure, we've been forced to have this conversation about the wine and spirit shops. And most people I know, in fact, virtually everybody that I know, on all sides of the political spectrum, think it's a dumb idea to sell off an asset, because we finally figured out privatization isn't working. Selling off a public asset, especially at a time when the market is kind of down, not a good idea. And the wine and spirit shops are one of those. Now, I was looking at Penn Live. It had an interesting question, because one of the hang-ups in the privatization is, should we allow beer to be sold in gas stations, and should we undo the liquor and gas prohibition, because you can't have liquor and gasoline near each other, evidently. Somehow it just doesn't mix. And they had an interesting poll where they asked, if, one of the question was, how do you see this? And, one of the responses was, I don't see it any more dangerous than to buy beer, than to go to Sheetz, than to drive to a bar and buy a drink. So one answer was yes, I would like to see the ban undone and them sell beer in gas stations. Another one is, I'd rather see beer distributors have more flexibility in the quantities that they sell, which I can fully understand. I can fully appreciate that, because I think it's dumb that they sell only in cases as well. But here again, the people who are promoting free market capitalism and competition, they got to protect the bar owners who have that six-pack business, because that's a big portion of their business, much like the cases are a big portion of these beer distributors' businesses, and the kegs and all that. The other choice was remove the ban on selling beer where gas is sold, but create no competition zones for beer. So we're making a nice carve-out for the beer distributors while privatizing everything else, which makes no sense. And the other answer was, I have no mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about it. And, people who want to see beer in gas stations, almost 75%, almost 3/4 of the people in this poll want to see beer in gas stations. And when you break it all down, what most people think, and these are the conversations that I've had, what the majority of people that I've talked to think is privatizing the wine and spirit shops means having beer in gas stations. And it doesn't. It doesn't mean anything close to it. What it means is closing the state stores and putting liquor on grocery store shelves. That's what the Turzais and the Republicans want to do. They want to sell off license to the big box retailers, and they want to put liquor on shelves. Beer would be still the way it was under their scheme. So it's interesting how the fighters of the free market are protecting the beer distributors, who have a monopoly as well. I just find it quite interesting, because they've chosen which monopoly they're happy with. All in it's the right thing to do category. It's not even really about budgets anymore. Although I do expect here in the coming weeks, from now until the end of the month when the budget is due, to hear that canard that, well, we can solve our budget problems by selling off the liquor stores. You can't. Ain't gonna happen. But I find it interesting that we're still gonna have that idiotic discussion. And it's not even really discussion, it's just talking points thrown at us, is really what it is. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, oh, wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
If you're an upper-class, uber-rich Brit, the price of being blessed with such wealth and social standing is that you're expected to be at least slightly amusing to the general public, offering some combination of doofus, daffy, and scandalous. Crispin Odey does not disappoint. He was born to old money, but most of it was lost by the time he came of age. So Crispin set out with old-fashioned drive and the help of some very wealthy old-school backers to make a new fortune. As a London hedge fund huckster, he has scored big during Europe's ongoing financial crisis by making socially useful investments, such as betting that British banks would collapse. They did. Ordinary Brits suffered, and Crispin became a billionaire. That's what hedge fund geniuses do. Of course, he now lives in a proper British mansion, but Odey is not satisfied to wallow selfishly in the wealth he raked in from his bets on the misfortunes of the masses. Rather, he's boosting the local economy by hiring architects, artisans, construction crews, and designers to build a very special $250,000 house on his estate. In so doing, he's also boosting the spirit of an entire nation caught in an economic slump. Indeed, Crispin has ignited the fiery spirit of populist outrage in merry old England. Why? Because the $250,000 house he has commissioned is a chicken coop. Yes, a full-scale stone structure of about 6,000 square feet, designed as a Grecian temple, complete with 24 columns and carved flourishes around the roof, all for chickens. Adding to the merriment, a chicken and egg are carved into one wall with a Latin inscription asking, "Who came first?" This is Jim Hightower saying the answer to that one is easy. Like billionaires everywhere, Crispin always puts himself first. The common people and the common good be damned.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Time for change. It's time to rearrange.
Keeping the chambers of commerce within their gated communities. The Rick Smith Show.
You can't tell me we're gonna make it somehow. I heard a wise man say the revolution starts now. I think it's time for change.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, download the podcast there at the website, or get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you are, any time of the day or night. Also can participate live with the program as we do stream it live. Kind of the whole reason that I did it. When we did our labor history tour last summer across the country, we had a lot of people going, man, we love what we hear. How do we hear more? Which is why we began developing the app to get to those folks as well. Because the reality is the right-wing money, the lots of right-wing money, you can't compete with that. A program like mine is never going to be able to compete with Coke money, but there are more of us. We've outprocreated them. And with the internet, while it's still open and neutral, there's still an opportunity to reach out to people all over the country to say, you know what, we need to be taking a stand and we need to be changing things. One of the things that caught my attention is I saw a bright smiling picture of my former congressman, Bud Schuster. It's not Bud. That's his father. He was the Asphalt King. The son of the Asphalt King, Bill Schuster, who is the chairman of the Transportation Committee now. And again, you go, really? We couldn't find somebody else in that entire district? It had to be the son of the Asphalt King. Anyway, in one of those rare moments of almost absolute bipartisanship, to show how far to the business community we've gone, how far to the corporate end we as a nation have gone, there was a new bipartisan law passed, a new water law promoting public-private partnerships. And you know how much I'm not a fan of P3s. 91 senators voted for it, 7 against. 412 congressmen voted for it. 4 voted against it. The other ones, obviously, no votes. Non-votes, non-voting, not no votes. Or I should say yays and nays, and then not voting. But when you get 91 of the 100 senators, or 91 of the 98 that bothered to vote, or 412 of the 416 of the 435 that bothered to vote for something, you know things have shifted. And in the past, you go back to the good old days of Dwight David Eisenhower, we would tax rich people. We would tax the billionaire class and say, you know what? We need waterways. We need new sewers. We need water pipes. We need all kinds of investment. We need a highway system. And we would tax and build. We would tax and invest. We don't do that anymore. No, can't do that. No, we have to go with our hat in our hand to private interests. These hedge fund managers and these equity firms, and go, oh please, we'd like a road. Can you help? Oh please. And they say, sure, we'll be happy to, with a public-private partnership, which basically means we're going to take public money, and the private sector is going to benefit from it instead of the public, instead of we the people. We're going to be on the hook for it. But we're going to have the risk, they're going to have the reward. That's kind of how public-private partnerships work. Now, there are those who will tell you, well, it's the only way we're going to get things done, Rick. I fundamentally disagree. Fundamentally disagree. You're going to tell me that the only way we're going to build a turnpike across Pennsylvania is if we placate to the wealth class and say, oh, we'll pay you profit. Well, we paid tolls. We, the people, did that. The only way we're going to put up a bridge is if we beg. Now, some will say, but Rick, we've done bond things in the past. That is correct. We have. We absolutely have. And I'm not against that idea. But this idea that there comes, and I remember when I had Donna Cooper on the program a couple of years ago, and she said when they were going to privatize the turnpike, that these Wall Street folks came in and said, you know what, we'll be happy to take your turnpike off your hands, but you have to guarantee that the money that we would have made with the money we're giving you on any other investment, and we'll pull a number out of wherever you think we're going to pull it out of, you're going to have to meet that number. You're going to have to guarantee all other opportunity costs, which just kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. Now stop and think about this for a second, because I think this is one of those very important moments. You're talking about our water supply. You're talking about the sewer lines. You're talking about the pipes and the treatment plants and all of that stuff that bring water into many of our homes. I've got a well water. I would rather have city water. All that free water I've got is costing me thousands. But we're privatizing our water. And it's funny that American Water is owned by, I think it's a French company, which is very, very comical to me. And we're privatizing all of our infrastructure. And we're upgrading this stuff with public-private partnerships so that the private sector has to make a profit off of our investment in our communities. Does that make any sense to anybody? Does it make sense to you? Because it doesn't make a whole hill of sense to me. But I guess it does show how far we as a society have gone in the pro-business mentality, in the anti-invest in ourselves mentality. Because we've been sold this, oh, you get no tax, no taxes, no. And like I said to Mike Sterlo, I said, look, I'm not against paying taxes. I just want them used properly. I don't want them handed out in corporate welfare. I don't want them handed out in profits on projects that should be profiting we the people. Is that too much to ask? Is that too outrageous? Is that too ridiculous? I don't think so. I think we the people, us, all of us, as a member of the community. Oh, you're talking silly talker. That's communism. No, it's what this nation was built on. It's being part of a neighborhood. It's being part of a city. It's being sane and rational. We'll see. Quick break. Right back with Hour 2. Stick around. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
Workers Independent News we can review.
For Doug Cunningham, I'm Joanne Powers. The International Labor Organization Committee on the Application of Standards collapsed this week at the International Labor Conference, ending today in Geneva. Representatives of business at the ILO refused to endorse the committee's findings on a range of serious cases involving major labor violations. Jeffrey Vogt, legal advisor to the International Trade Union Confederation, says that since 2012, the employers have tried to disrupt the way the ILO functions, and the right to strike does not exist at the international level.
They're trying to undermine the ILO generally. Expert interpretations and a whole range of conventions are incorrect, but doing it is going to disrupt the oversight of cases on some of the worst labor violators in the world.
For decades, ILO Convention 87 has been consistently interpreted by experts within the ILO as guaranteeing the right to strike.
Their arguments are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of freedom of association. Legal framework in which the ILOs work. There's very well settled that a right to strike does exist as part of ILO Convention on Freedom of Association, and to argue otherwise is wishful thinking on their part.
The United States is one of the few countries that has not ratified ILO Convention 87. The world's top 3 platinum producers announced Thursday that they have reached an informal agreement with unionized South African miners that could end the longest and costliest mining strike in the country's history. 80,000 members of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union walked off the job in January, demanding a basic minimum wage increase of more than double for underground workers. The strike has crippled South Africa's economy, costing mining companies more than $2 billion in lost revenue. The union is putting the agreement to its members, and it is not yet clear if they will accept the proposed offer. A July 10th determination from the Commerce Department could have serious implications for whether or not steel workers will retain family-supporting union jobs around the country. America's steel manufacturers and workers have joined forces to fight back against dumped imports of steel pipe used in the extraction of oil and natural gas reserves. The Alliance for American Manufacturing, a partnership between the United Steelworkers and leading steel manufacturers, is calling for a thorough investigation of steel imports from South Korea being dumped on the U.S. market below cost. Scott Paul, president of the AAM.
They will always have disagreements, but they agreed that having a focus on the importance of manufacturing and good-paying jobs to our domestic economy was something that made a lot of sense. And we find that elected officials have nowhere to run when you bring in both the business side and the labor side to talk about a set of issues like we do. I think we've at least woken up the White House and Congress as to how important this is. Getting them to do something is another story.
AAM has been holding a nationwide series of Save Our Steel Jobs rallies. Learn more at AmericanManufacturing.org.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from Union-Owned Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, doing whatever it takes to meet your business lending needs for new construction, remodeling, or building training facilities. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News provided by Diversified Media Enterprises.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So this morning on Morning Joe, you had Senator John McCain ripping into the Obama administration, basically saying, we won. We won in Iraq, and it's all Obama's fault. Now, where you stand on this, it looks more and more like comes down to political ideology and down those lines, much like we talked about the Pew survey that came out yesterday. So I tend to blame most of this on Bush and some inactivity by Obama, but still a bad situation that I don't think we should have gotten into. But here to talk a little bit about it, give us his expert opinion, I've asked Hardin Lang, Senior Fellow with the National Security Team over at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org, their website. Hardin, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks very much for having me.
So I look at this assessment. John McCain says, we won. We won. We everything we wanted in Iraq, we did, and Obama's lost it. Is that a fair assessment?
That strikes me as a pretty significant stretch of the imagination, Rick. I think what we're looking at Iraq is a situation where we should never have been there in the first place.
Thank you.
And that once we got in, a long, drawn effort with a bunch of mistakes, but a bunch of valiant effort on the part of our troops. And at the end of this, you had the Obama administration come in and try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear by getting us out of a conflict that we never should have been in the first place. And a lot of time and effort spent on trying to develop some basic national institutions, including the Iraqi army, to sort of keep the peace by the time we pulled out. And along the way, the fundamental problem here is a failure on the part of the current administration in Baghdad, Prime Minister Maliki, to keep any form of national reconciliation that had been developed with the Sunni population.
Right. So it's a failure of political, you're saying on his political end, not so much ours.
I don't see how the Obama administration could be even accused of failing on anything here. I mean, we could have stayed in Iraq until the cows come home, but that's not going to leave behind the kind of political consensus that's required to make troops stand and fight in Mosul against these guys when they came across the border.
Yeah, because I'm seeing all these stories, Hardin, of the police and the military guys coming to work in their uniforms with their civilian clothes underneath. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, that's sort of a heads up that something significant is wrong. And that's not about the kind of training or the kind of kit that you were given through one of our training programs. That's about the fact that you don't believe in fighting this particular enemy for these guys in power.
Right. So how much of this do you think is I go back to Paul Bremer, who was the coalition provisional authority, the big CEO over there, with the idea that we disband the whole military because we don't know who was in line with Hussein, and we don't know their loyalties. So we just sent them away with their guns and their training and all that to who knows where, and then tried to start from scratch. How much of this that we're struggling with now is part of that decision back in, I think, 2003?
Rick, don't get me started on this point. I mean, that was perhaps the second, besides invading Iraq, that was the second worst decision that we made. I was actually up in Mosul in 2003 when the decision came down to demobilize, to ban the Ba'ath Party and then demobilize the Iraqi military. And all hell broke loose, not only inside of amongst the Iraqis, but amongst even our own troops. I mean, there had been a sincere effort underway to try to bring some of these guys back into the fold, and we never really recovered from that. I mean, once you demobilize one of the cornerstones of the state, it's pretty hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Yeah, I mean, we basically kicked it off the wall. And along the way, and to give Bremer his credit for boogering that up, also, he lost almost $9 billion in skidded up, shrink-wrapped cash. And I don't know how you lose $8.8, almost $9 billion, but along with pretty much screwing that whole region up for probably the next century, lost a whole ton of money along with it.
It wasn't cheap, that's for sure.
So, in looking at the media reports that we're seeing now, because this McCain quote is like wildfire. Everything is now Obama's fault. And look, he's the guy behind the desk. To use the Harry Truman statement, the buck stops here. He's the guy right now who's going to have to carry this steaming pile of you-know-what around. What's he going to do? I mean, where do we go from here? I was against putting troops into Iraq from the beginning, and I'm even more so against it now.
Yeah, look, I don't think that anyone sort of with a clear head is thinking seriously about reintroducing U.S. combat troops or U.S. troops into combat in Iraq to try to fix the situation. I mean, we can't want to fix this thing more than the Iraqis want to fix this thing. we don't have a partner to work with, and this has always been, this has been the tale of Iraq for quite some time, since we went in. So, fundamentally here, Obama today in his address at the White House, said some very smart things about the need to condition whatever we're going to do going forward with serious outreach on the part of the government in Baghdad to the Sunni population. Now, it may be too late for that, and that's the real problem. But we do have it is a bit of a conundrum for us, right? Because while we need the Iraqis to work with to try to get a result, it's not a great thing that this sort of terrorist state or terrorist group that's been operating in northern Syria in eastern Syria and now it's split over into western Iraq, where it was for quite some time. These guys have taken over a piece of real estate this big. It's destabilizing to the region, and eventually it'll be a threat to us.
And isn't this something where possibly we work with the Iranians, because it can't be good for them either?
Well, it's very interesting. It's very interesting that you say that, right? Because I don't think work with the Iranians is how this would happen, but there certainly is a confluence of interest in that we don't want to see the Iraqi state implode, and neither do the Iranians.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have put it as work with. The enemy of my enemy is, kind of that theory of, the enemy of my enemy is still kind of somebody I should be working with. So maybe we have some common interest that we should be collectively working towards. Maybe not hand in hand, but I got to think that it's not stabilizing for the region to have this going on.
It's not stabilizing for the region, and I think it would be a mistake to think that we're going to be able to solve this without everybody in the region playing a role, and that includes Iran.
Do you think that plays to our arrogance? When we went into this, I remember thinking you're going to change a region of the world that has been the way they are for centuries. We went into Afghanistan thinking that we were going to be the one that was going to be able to change Afghanistan, and here we are all these years later, and basically we've made some big rocks smaller, but I don't think much more than that.
Well, I think both in Iraq and Afghanistan, you've had, the U.S. military is the most impressive military organization in the history of the world. And I operate next to these guys in a number of these different places, and I cannot say enough good things about them.
No question. Absolutely no question on that. But to say that you're going to change the culture of those regions...
changing cultures, Rick, changing cultures is something that takes generations.
Exactly.
And the U.S. military is not designed to go in and build states in these places. Building states takes a long time. One of the biggest mistakes in Iraq was, as you said earlier, was to go in and disband a big chunk of the state, the Iraqi military. In Afghanistan, there wasn't anything to work with when we got there, for God's sakes. So now you have an effort, to try to leave behind some kind of structure that's going to hold together after we've left, and hopefully keep the really nasty folks from getting out of hand again. And that's a very, very tall order.
Yeah, there are no good options here. Once the genie's out of the bottle, I don't know that there have been any good options from the beginning, and we've just made a lot of really bad mistakes along the way. And look, I'm the first one to point the finger at Obama and say he made a mistake here, but not here. I don't see how you could have done anything different, because correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the Iraqi government want us out?
The Iraqi government are the ones who wouldn't agree to the terms that would allow our military to actually stay in theater.
So
Obama had that negotiation with his Iraqi counterparts. That we tried that, and the Iraqis were the ones who said, you can stay, but only under conditions that our uniformed military would have found completely unacceptable.
Yeah, so now here we are. They're in a whole bunch of you-know-what, and now they're going, help? Really?
They're in a world of pain right now, and your options change, and your sense of flexibility about what's acceptable or not acceptable changes very quickly when the threat to you becomes existential. The question is now, what can we do about it?
Yeah, because here's what worries me, though, Arden. You've got all these people saying, we need to go over and airstrikes and all of this stuff, and there's a whole bunch of ugliness that comes along with that. But that's the first step, in my view, of one of our planes gets shot down, something outrageous happens, and before you know it, we're right back where we started from in this war type situation where there's no victory, and I still don't see where victory was. And John McCain says we won. I still don't know what it is we won.
No, I think it's a fair point. But look, here's the thing about airstrikes. It's a very, very tricky situation in the sense that you've got a lot of people who nobody in their right mind likes, who have pushed into some very dangerous pieces of territory. and there is a possibility that this is allowed to continue, you're going to see, the level of warfare, the level of sectarian divide split again into open sectarian civil war. And that's a really bad result, not just for Iraq, but for the region. I mean, the tensions between Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc., if you want to see that stuff escalate, letting the situation in Iraq spill out of control begins to get us in some of that territory. Now, there are things that we can do, and there are things you can do, through air, drones, etc., to help sort of push the situation in the right direction. But it's complicated. It's not an easy thing to do, and it doesn't make any sense to do it if you don't have a local partner. I mean, we can go in from the air and do all kinds of things, but if you don't have anyone to hold the ground behind you, you're just going to rearrange the deck chairs in the Titanic.
And again, it comes back down to the Iraqi government standing up and the Iraqi people saying this is what we want, not what's coming.
That's correct.
So in looking at this, because one of the things that I keep going back to is, if you're Obama, what do you do? Because at home here, we keep hearing voices, mostly from the right, and I've seen some Democrats say some things as well, but mostly from the Republicans saying that Obama's weak on foreign policy, he lost this. Doesn't that send a really negative message and a message of a divided nation across the world?
Yeah, I mean, that's just that's the kind of politics that we've come to expect from these kind of situations. So, and of course, there's going to be a moment where people are going to try to make a big fuss and try to get some more egg on the face of the president. And, this is a difficult moment in terms of the foreign policy narrative. But, I mean, fundamentally, if you look at what this president was able to do in terms of getting us out of Iraq in the first place and sort of drawing down the war effort in Afghanistan and really taking al-Qaeda head on, it's hard for me to see how you're going to stack that scorecard against his favor over the long term. I also just don't think the American people are there when the Republicans start talking about the need for going back into Iraq, how we've lost it, how we need to get back in there and make an effort. I don't think there's an appetite on the part of the American people.
I sure hope you're right.
To put boots on the ground.
I sure hope you're right. But, my fear is when you turn on the evening news and you see all of this stuff, and all the saber rattling and all the chest thumping and, I remember back in after 9/11, there was that whole push. Hey, we got to go do something to somebody. I fear that.
Well, Rick, I think this is a moment where hopefully cooler heads will prevail.
Yeah. Well, what's the last line of questioning? What should we look for in the coming days to kind of give us an idea? What are you guys looking for there at the National Security Team at the Center for American Progress to kind of guide you in where you're seeing the future going? What kind of things should we be looking for in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I think what we'd really like to see at this stage is first a real effort, and I think we'll see this forthcoming. We already do a lot in the region, particularly with our partners, the people who've sort of stood foursquare with us, Jordan, for instance, to help sort of inoculate them against additional spillage, right? So there's first a piece to this where we need to go out and be working with our allies to make sure that everyone, that this threat doesn't spill farther outside, deeper into Iraq and farther into Syria and then outside those borders. The second thing is there's going to be a very clear need for some heavy diplomacy here because we're at a moment where sort of regional tensions, between some of the Gulf states and Iran as the proxy fight here heats up, that we need to get in there and make sure that, people don't take steps that push the region deeper towards sort of a regional conflict. The third thing is that we need to see some serious moves by the government in Baghdad to show themselves capable of forming some kind of national unity government that brings some of the Sunni in. And the most frightening thing I heard today was Grand Ayatollah Sistani, who was sort of the religious leader of the Shia in Iraq and then more broadly, coming forward with a pronouncement calling for the militia to remobilize. Now, that kind of stuff, if something can't be done to bring that to heel, we really are at a stage of serious sectarian civil war reemerging in Iraq.
Wow, and that's not good for anybody in that region, and especially Jordan. I mean, Jordan's already got enough problems with the Syrian civil war and all the refugees that they've taken on over the last couple of years.
They already, just from Syria alone, they've got over 600,000 Syrian refugees in the country right now, and that's after absorbing the blow from Iraq. 10%, their population has increased by 10% because of the refugee flows out of Syria. So we're doing a lot, and we need to be doing more to help the Jordanians on this. And now we need to do something to make sure that they feel secure in light of this most recent event.
So from an economic standpoint, I mean, because you look at Jordan, they've got to be struggling economically. Is this somewhere where we need to be adding some more economic support? And I know there's no real appetite in this country for more foreign spending. And I mean, because I keep getting the emails that a quarter of our budget goes to handouts to other countries. But is this where we should be stepping in with resources?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably a wise use of our money. We give Jordan a lot. I mean, I have to say also it should be pointed out that the U.S. is, we're the top donor for the humanitarian crisis in Syria.
Right, but we're not spending a quarter of our budget. Let me just clarify that. It's more like 1%.
I mean, first off, those numbers aren't even close. And this is one of those situations where we're putting a lot of money into Jordan. What we probably need to do is a little bit more into the refugee camps, but even more to help Jordan provide the sort of basic services to its general population. Because the way it works, 80% of the refugees in Jordan live outside of the camps. And so they're just a basic burden on the social services of the country. And so we need to do a little bit more to help that. But almost more importantly, the Gulf states, with all those petrodollars, they need to pull up their shorts a little bit and step in here and do more.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Part of our role is to use the money that we lead on to support Jordan to get others in the region to kick in and help support them.
There you go. Maybe we could find that $8.8 billion that the provisional authority, the CEO Bremer, lost. Maybe that's still floating around. Maybe it's on a truck with the aluminum tubes driving around Iraq and Afghanistan. But Hardin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for your insight. I appreciate it a lot.
Rick, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Great talking with you, Hardin Lang, Senior Fellow with the National Security Team over at the Center for American Progress. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're on the road to nowhere. We're on the road to nowhere. We're on the road to nowhere.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
It's time for The World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The work week has come to a close, but it's decision time in Baghdad and Washington, and perhaps Tehran, as military planners try and think up a way to prevent Iraq from slipping into the hands of terrorists. After months of worsening violence, a group called ISIL, or the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant, captured the cities of Mosul and Tikrit this week. The U.S. spent $25 billion training the Iraqi armed forces over the past decade, but in remarks today, President Barack Obama blamed their courage and the lack of focus among Iraq's leaders for the army's poor performance.
The fact that they are not willing to stand and fight and defend their posts against admittedly hardened terrorists, but not terrorists who are overwhelming in numbers, indicates that there's a problem with morale.
Given these issues, it's become clear that outside help will be needed to make a stand against ISIL. The U.S. is reportedly moving the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, which could be a sign the Pentagon is considering airstrikes. But Obama said today he'll need time to ponder his broader strategy.
Although events on the ground in Iraq have been happening very quickly, our ability to plan, whether it's military action or work with the Iraqi government on some of these political issues, is going to take several days. So people should not anticipate that this is something that is going to happen overnight.
According to media reports, the Iraqi government is said to be considering a military appeal to Iran if U.S. assistance doesn't materialize. The ironies of foreign policy. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, I'm sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force.
I still remember that speech like it was yesterday. I got to be honest. I remember it like it was yesterday, then going on and saying, oh, hey, don't destroy oil wells. How many people remember that? I mean, I was expecting some speech of, you know, we're doing this and we're going to liberate you and it's going to be good for the country. We're going to all pull together after this and things are going to be wonderful. And then it was bad mistake. I mean, right there from the beginning, bad mistake. And then don't destroy oil wells. Really? And how many people remember what it was originally called? Operation Iraqi Liberation, until someone figured out that spelled oil. And it's one of those Orwellian things that you kind of go, was that really intended? I mean, it was this kind of one of those, let's see if anybody notices. Or if it was just, one of those things that, the subliminal things. It just makes me wonder. And, I go back and I remember those days. And with all of this talk that it's Obama's fault, it's all Obama's fault. Obama did this all. In fact, Obama started the war. Yeah, I actually had someone tell me that Obama voted for it. I'm going, really? Obama was in the Senate in 2001? I don't remember that. Don't even think he was in the Illinois Senate yet in 2001. But I find it interesting that those who cheerleaded this and actually got us into this mess are now saying, oh, it's Obama's fault. It's him. So I thought, I would dig up a couple of clips that I used to play often because I think it's important to remember. One of those was, we went into Iraq, and a lot of people said, well, they're part of 9/11, and there were Iraqi terrorists on the plane. No, there weren't. There weren't. Sorry. In fact, I don't even remember if there were any from Afghanistan. I know there were. I think 11 of them were from Saudi Arabia. Some from Jordan. I don't remember any from Iraq or Afghanistan. But facts. Who needs them? But Bush was asked, what did Iraq have to do with 9/11?
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
A rare moment of candor. He was asked, hey, where is Bin Laden?
So I don't know where he is. No, I just don't spend that much time on him. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I just don't spend that much time thinking. Not that important. Yeah.
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't.
We were looking for those aluminum tubes. And how many people remember the cartoon drawings that Colin Powell went to the UN with? We know they've got mobile labs buying aluminum tubes that all the experts said couldn't do what they claimed they could do with these particular tubes at all. And then the most egregious thing that, look, you can make value judgments about what Bush came up with. You can disagree as a matter of policy. You can disagree as a matter of, he thought he was doing the right thing. I say I don't believe that. I think this was Cheney's deal. I think Bush was just pushed along for the ride because it was his legacy. And if you buy what Mickey Herskowitz wrote in his book that was supposed to be ghostwritten for Bush, Bush supposedly told Herskowitz that, you know what, if I get the chance to invade Iraq, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have that political capital. I'm going to be reelected. I'm going to have a successful presidency, not like my father. So you kind of got to wonder how much of that played into it as well. But all of that stuff aside, you could say that these were just decisions that were made by a president in a tough time. The country had bloodthirst. The country was angry. But the press club dinner, and I forget which year it was. I think it was 2005, or I think it was 2005. Now, understand, the president's always, and Obama's done it too, they always do little skits. They always do little funny ha-ha things to kind of poke at the press corps. And it's kind of a give and take thing. And I understand, look, there are some things you joke about. To me, this is one of those things that you didn't joke about. And I've yet to hear anyone defend it. So as part of his funny ha-ha, if you will, they shot a video of Bush running around the Oval Office, lifting up the sofa cushions. And this is what he said.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
Yeah, that's really a chuckle, isn't it? As he's walking around the Oval Office looking under the couch for the weapons of mass destruction that they didn't find in Iraq. Now, will I bail Bush out and say that everybody knew Hussein had weapons of mass destruction? Yes. I think everyone did know that. And how'd we know? Because we sold them to him. We just couldn't find them. Or he had already destroyed them. Whichever one of those answers you believe. Do I believe he was trying to buy yellow cake uranium from Niger? No. And we had a president, we had an administration which used Richard Armitage to out a CIA agent in deep cover. So you got to kind of wonder about the time. And yet here we are right now in this situation brought to us because of bad decisions during the Bush administration, where I don't care who's sitting in the White House right now, there are no good options. None whatsoever. And that, to me, is a huge problem. And you've got these Republicans now running around, the war hawks who got us into this, like McCain, pointing his finger saying, we won and you lost it for us. And I got to be honest, I don't even know what winning was. Quick break. Right back.
The color of your skin don't matter to me. As long as we can live in harmony. Why can't we be friends?
United we bargain. Divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Obviously, we came up short.
GOP leader Eric Cantor defeated by climate denier, who doesn't want you to know he's a climate denier, and for good reason.
The argument is not about climate change. The argument is respond to climate change.
Australia broils in its hottest 2 years on record, but their prime minister is a global warming skeptic. Historic heat brings riots to India, plus Tesla is giving away its secrets for free.
All of those secrets and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We cannot lose the coal industry, folks. What will we give to naughty kids on Christmas?
This is your Green News Report.
A stocking full of wind? Come on.
Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, big news from Tesla, who says they're giving away their technology to the world for free. The electric car company who makes these fantastic cars Really?
Yes, they're going open source. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced that his company will, quote, not initiate patent lawsuits against anyone who in good faith wants to use our technology. That means that if other car companies want to produce electric cars, they can use Tesla's technology to do it and advance Musk's dream of electric vehicles everywhere.
That's amazing, actually. I hope others take him up on it, and I hope he can be trusted that he won't sue them when they do.
Yeah.
What else you got for us today?
Well, first, an historic record heat wave in India is bringing the nation to the breaking point, causing rioting over widespread blackouts and hundreds of deaths. Temperatures have held at more than 110 degrees for nearly 3 weeks now in northern India, with some areas hitting 120 degrees. Overnight temperatures in Mumbai this week did not drop below 110 degrees. At midnight.
Wow, and the rioting that comes with it is, again, exactly what not only scientists but defense experts here in the U.S. have been warning us about for so long.
Yeah, that it will lead to unrest. Now, climate scientists say that this heat wave already bears the fingerprint of human-caused global warming. They predict that these extreme temperatures could become the new normal in coming decades. Down under in Australia, they're in the midst of one of their hottest autumns on record in the southern hemisphere, and they just announced that the last 2 years in Australia were Australia's hottest 2 years on record, and that trend is also projected to get worse with global warming. But sorry, Australia, your Conservative Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, is a climate change skeptic who repealed Australia's landmark carbon tax.
I believe that carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes are the wrong way to go. The right way to go is to take sensible steps to improve energy efficiency, to cultivate better soils, to plant more trees, to take the kind of direct action measures which we certainly intend to take in Australia.
Abbott is traveling in the U.S. on his first official visit this week. He says he and Canadian Prime Minister David Cameron are committed to increasing their country's fossil fuel exports, and therefore they oppose any strong international agreement to reduce the carbon emissions that cause global warming.
Yes, anything but charging more money to industry. Nonetheless, in that debate, I think it's a legitimate one. At least he's not out there saying, no, global warming doesn't exist. There's nothing we need to do about it. At least he's recognizing that there's a problem. Now the debate is about what to do about it, which, frankly, is where the debate ought to be.
Yes, but he does favor only voluntary controls for polluting industries, which his own scientists say will do absolutely nothing.
Oh, well, he has the right to be wrong, but, at least he's not crazy.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., in the shocking reported primary election loss of Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor this week, it's no surprise that his Tea Party-backed challenger David Brat is a climate change denier who spouts myths like scientists predicted an ice age in the 1970s, which of course isn't true. Scientists didn't say that.
But Time magazine said so on the cover, so I guess that counts.
But it was never a scientific consensus.
In fact, at the same time, way more scientists had warned about warming rather than cooling back then. But press on.
We'd play you the audio of Brat denying global warming, but once Mother Jones reported on his science denial, all of his YouTube videos were suddenly pulled and set to private. Somebody doesn't want you to know he's a climate science denier.
And why would that be?
Because new public policy polling shows American voters have very little tolerance for denier politicians. A new PPP poll finds not only are President Obama's new carbon emission standards for power plants very popular with the vast majority of Americans, but also the same poll finds more Americans than ever say they won't vote for any presidential candidate in 2016 who doesn't believe that climate change is caused by human activity.
That's a whole lot of people who won't be voting for whoever wins the Republican primary for president in 2016. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we could not get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download us anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, where we hope you'll give us a good review to help other people find us as well. Plus, follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
But the morning feels so bad. Every seems to nag me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday, it's just so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got money on my mind.
Yes, Friday, finally Friday. You know, look, I got a big weekend ahead of me. I hope everyone else does as well. Tomorrow, please, tomorrow morning, get out to Dickinson College for the big panel on how we turn the country around, 9 a.m. to noon. I'll be participating in one of the panels on why unions are important here in Pennsylvania. So come on out. Hopefully some support. I know there's going to be a lot of crazy right-wing. With all the nonsense that's been going on in the state Senate this week with unions being like Hitler and Putin, I'm sure some fun should come of that. So hopefully folks will come out and participate. But it is Friday, and it is our Future Friday, which is why I've asked Terrence Heath, online producer over at the Campaign for America's Future, to come talk to us about, well, what's tomorrow going to look like. Terrence, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, you know, you look at Tuesday, the big election there in Virginia, nobody saw it coming. Nobody. I would love to say, yes, I saw it coming because he's such an idiot. I can't imagine anybody voting for him, but nobody saw it coming.
I'd love to say I was able to see it coming too, because I'd be all over the television right now. Nobody saw it coming. I mean, there were rumblings of people in that district being dissatisfied with Eric Cantor and over a number of different issues. And of course, Washington has been analyzing it left and right since then, and has basically decided that it's a defeat that means everything and nothing.
Yeah.
It's about immigration. It's not about immigration. It's about big money. It's not about big money. It's about
I think it's about being lazy and arrogant. That's what I think it's about. I think on election night, if you're in a steakhouse in Washington, D.C. and not shaking hands and kissing babies in your district, you deserve to get a boot in the behind.
You're right, exactly. I dare I use the E word, entitlement,
yeah.
Maybe a little, but Eric Cantor as a politician, how shall I put this? Never came across as the sharpest tool in the shed. He was one of the young guns, in 2010 when the Republicans were surging forward with the Tea Party and about to retake the House and Congress, and he and Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy were the young generation of new Republicans that were the future of the party. And Cantor was the leader, except that he really never brought much to the table in terms of really anything. I can't think of any leadership effort that he spearheaded that really ever got out of the gate.
Yeah, he was more of a finger in the wind guy.
Right. It's a surprise in that you're an incumbent, you're the majority, you're the majority leader, and that hasn't happened since the position was created in 1899. This is the first time a sitting House Majority Leader has lost the primary election.
Which now he is a part of history. You got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, there is that. There is that.
He'll be a Trivial Pursuit question in about 50 years.
Right. But the thing is, I don't think that in the end, I really don't think that Eric Cantor is going to be hurting for much of anything. He was a very effective water carrier for Wall Street and the 1%, and I'm sure he will be outfitted with a golden parachute.
Oh, I'm sure.
And land somewhere with a cushy job, probably teaching at some right-wing university and charging speakers' fees for going hither, thither, and yon, giving speeches. And he's a very telegenic man, so he might, even pop up on Fox News or elsewhere making commentary. But I think he's going to be fine. What I'm worried about is what the victory, David Bratt's victory, means for for the next Congress in terms of if it's a bellwether for an even more obstructive Congress. Because for all of the hoo-ha about this guy and how, his students gave him great reviews and some said he was a real hottie, he's an Ayn Rand loving, I don't know what to even call him, teaching a course that's basically funded by I think BB&T Bank, for that gives basically college professors funds to promote the ideals and ideology of Ayn Rand. So.
Well, if you read his his writings, and one of the things that caught my attention that I talked about yesterday, he's a believer in Christian capitalism. This idea that the church and Christianity and capitalism should be merged, to use his word, synthesized. This merging of capitalism and Christianity, which to me had always been polar opposites. I don't know how you could say greed is good,
right?
But
and I'm an old Sunday school teacher, from the South.
Come on, bring the prosperity gospel, Terrence. Bring it to us.
Baptist. And I hear stuff like that, and I always think to myself, that's not what the man was talking about. So I don't know how you fuse those two things together. It's interesting in that it's in terms of they have the libertarian Wall Street unrestrained capitalism on one side and of their base, and then they have the Christian fundamentalist Bible believing on the other side, and they've never completely wed those two parts of their base because there's some direct conflicts there. They've made some interesting.
They've made huge strides.
They made some interesting moves in that direction, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these mega churches that keeps propping up, and I don't know if you saw the story I guess it was like 2 months ago, that Joel Osteen, the big mega church leader, who evidently his church got robbed of a Saturday donation of like $660,000.
I was going to say,
and you go, wow.
Somebody is like, I don't know. Depending on where you go with that, that's the house.
In my neighborhood, that's half the neighborhood. That's just not a
right,
house.
Exactly. So depending on where you go with that, that's a house, or a whole neighborhood, or more money than some people may see in their working lives. And where is it going?
I know where it's not going. It's not going to pay taxes.
Right, exactly. And so it's interesting to see someone like David Bratt come along and attempt to wed these two, if you ask me, very, very divergent philosophies. But what he does touch on is the continuing the right-wing attitude towards the poor in this country, the low-income people on food stamps, and basically making it a moral condition that, this goes all the way back to George Lakoff, that taking poverty as a sign of moral failing.
Right.
And thus, that's why if you put the church in the position of helping these people, then they also get a healthy dose of judgment along with that.
A good dose of browbeating never hurt anyone.
Right. I mean, and a belief in allowing people to suffer so that they will repent. The guy who coined the phrase compassionate conservatism and was behind George W. Bush's whole
faith-based initiative
push, said in one of his books that there is something to be said for quote unquote time in the pit, allowing people to suffer what he believed was the consequences of their iniquities, so that redemption would follow. Conversion and redemption and repentance would follow. That's where you get guys like David Bratt, who don't believe that the government should be helping people because the government is indiscriminate.
Yeah, that's where you get people like our state senator here in Pennsylvania, Scott Wagner, who said, those unions, they're like Nazis and like Putin. And he had a wonderful, little speech on the floor of the Senate the other day, and he had this. Listen to this.
But there are a couple things required. Number one, you would have to have an alarm clock, and you would have to be able to get out of bed. You would be able to have to pass a drug test, and you would have to have some work ethic.
Yeah, see, all those unemployed people, they just don't have alarm clocks because they're lazy, and they can't pass a drug test. They have to have work ethic. And he goes on to say that they always got their pants down around their knees, and they're uneducated. This whole right-wing spiel of blaming the poor and the unemployed.
He wasn't on Wednesday. He wasn't obviously standing outside the Capitol building on Wednesday. I was there for an event called Witness Wednesdays. And a coalition, including the Council on Human Needs and some other groups, for 7 weeks this summer are going to be going to the Capitol and reading the stories of long-term unemployed people who have been suffering as a result of the loss of their unemployment benefits, because House Republicans have blocked any extension of it, and John Boehner would even bring it to a vote. None of those stories that I heard, and the thousands of stories that they have in their database, are from people who are lazy and have no work ethic. These are people who, to a person, have worked all of their lives. One woman, I remember, she was a breast cancer coordinator in Pennsylvania, wrote that she and her husband in 42 years of marriage had never been unemployed. But she lost her job and her husband lost his about 3 months after that. They are about to lose their house. They've already sold their car to make the next mortgage payment, but they're going to lose their home of 30 years in which they raised 3 sons and 1 grandchild.
Well, that's good for the economy. It's good for the economy, Terrence. You get the Mitt Romney could buy it up and rent it back to them.
And I listened to stories of people who were one guy who was in the military and worked on a nuclear sub and got out of the service and got a job and worked for 3 years, and after that he was laid off, and so he not being lazy turned around and decided, I'm going to go to law school so I can get a better job and provide for my family, and was doing fine up until his unemployment insurance ran out. And there's story after story of that. There was a woman who was studying to be a nurse, again, someone who was working to better herself and was just making it, a single mother, just making it until her insurance benefits were cut off, and she ended up having to withdraw from her classes because she had to worry about keeping a roof over her head instead.
See, that's insane to me.
And so you're not talking about lazy people. You're talking about people who have worked all of their lives, want to work, want to be productive, and are trying to better themselves. And it's I can't even come up with a word for the cruelty that's involved in denying these people help.
Not just the cruelty, not just the humiliation and all the stuff that comes with it, the ignorance and a matter of policy. Yeah. I mean, to say that we're not going to have these people participating in the economy that we need just seems, from a policy standpoint, dumb.
Even if you took the morality issue out of it, it benefits no one to have all of these people sitting out the economy, not participating in the economy. It actually benefits everyone to have more people participating in the economy by working, and then using the money that they make working to buy goods and services that support other jobs. Now, I'm not a Nobel Prize winning economist, so I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something in that.
Well, it goes back to that punishment, because they got to get an alarm clock and pull up their pants. And I listened to this spiel that this right wing state senator, this newly minted, very wealthy, I'm a producer even though I made all my money off of government contracts, kind of wonderful human being. You know, basically a guy who should be sitting in a park by himself, talking, muttering to himself, is now in the Senate. Saying, "Look at that kid, pull up your pants," and just an old curmudgeon who really needs somebody to smack him.
And doesn't what he's a lot like a lot of people who don't realize how much help they have had. And like you said, who's made all of their money. Yes, you're self-made. You made your fortune off government contracts. So without the American taxpayer, where would you be exactly?
Yeah. So let me ask you, going back to this Witness Wednesday, which I think is a great idea, to highlight the fact that there are long-term unemployed folks who are struggling in our communities. Because like I got to be honest, I talk to people every day. They're struggling too. Everybody that I know, just about everybody I know, is struggling to make it to next week.
And even people who are working are constantly looking over their shoulder because a lot of people are probably not more than a couple of paychecks away from desperation.
No. So is the answer, you know, I've said I would if you don't want to extend unemployment, fine. Then we need to have government be the employer of last resort. We need to get people who want jobs. We need to get them jobs.
Exactly. If you're not going to do anything else, then because it's not like there's nothing to do. It's not like there is no work that needs to be doing. Anyone in this country could probably step out the door, get in their car, and drive 5-10 miles in any direction and find infrastructure that desperately needs attention and that desperately needs work. And it only takes a little bit because it's employer of last resort and can put enough people to work on things like that. It spreads out from there because those people are now back participating in the economy. They are back making an income and then using that income to purchase goods and services that support other jobs and maybe even increase demand that creates jobs.
Yeah, but I'll tell you why that's never going to happen. Because you got people like this new state senator, this Scott Wagner, who understands that if you give people jobs, you're going to tighten the labor force. You're going to have more people with jobs and with options, which means the wages are naturally going to raise. Look, business owners love the surplus population, the surplus employment, because you know what? They can go, well, at least you got a job. At least you're not that poor slub over there. And that's why I get to pay you close to nothing, because you're not that guy.
That's one of the things that why they hate Obamacare, because one of the ways in which it's working is, again, giving people a freedom of choosing an option that they didn't have before by getting rid of the insurance lock, or whatever you want to call it, that kept people in jobs that they didn't particularly want to have to keep just to have health insurance, and they don't have to do that anymore. And those are the ways that government works to, and in some ways, doing the things that that I think labor unions did for a lot of people at their peak, and taking the things that that make it easier for a person to earn a living and raise a family and have a decent life in this country and better themselves and give their kids more opportunities than they had, and making those things available to more people.
Yep.
But it does, yeah, you're right. It tightens things up for business owners and for employers, because they have to, if they want to keep good people, they have to pay them more and they have to treat them better.
And that's, to me, that's the answer. Get people jobs, get more people into the workforce, tighten up that labor pool, and that's how wages will come up as well, along with raising the minimum wage.
Right.
Terrence, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Terrence Heath, online producer at the Campaign for America's Future. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
To the last of us, fight till we die. To the keys of the kingdom are mine. All stand together for the world to see. Now the time is right. Split out all our dreams. Say the words forever. Your strength will never leave. If you want to win the fight, say I believe.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Hey there, working class heroes. Make sure you pick up the Rick Smith Show app on your iPhone, BlackBerry, or Palm right there at the store.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-888-520-RICK. That's 1-888-520-7425.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
Workers Independent News we can review.
For Doug Cunningham, I'm Joanne Powers. The International Labor Organization Committee on the Application of Standards collapsed this week at the International Labor Conference, ending today in Geneva. Representatives of business at the ILO refused to endorse the committee's findings on a range of serious cases involving major labor violations. Jeffrey Vogt, legal advisor to the International Trade Union Confederation, says that since 2012, the employers have tried to disrupt the way the ILO functions by insisting that the right to strike does not exist at the international level.
They're trying to undermine the ILO generally by saying that its expert interpretations and a whole range of conventions are incorrect. But doing it is going to disrupt the oversight of cases on some of the worst labor violators in the world.
For decades, ILO Convention 87 has been consistently interpreted by experts within the ILO as guaranteeing the right to strike.
Their arguments are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of freedom of association and the entire international legal framework in which the ILOs work. There's very well settled that a right to strike does exist as part of ILO Convention on Freedom of Association, and to argue otherwise is wishful thinking on their part.
The United States is one of the few countries that has not ratified ILO Convention 87. The world's top 3 platinum producers announced Thursday that they have reached an informal agreement with unionized South African miners that could end the longest and costliest mining strike in the country's history. 80,000 members of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union walked off the job in January, demanding a basic minimum wage increase of more than double for underground workers. The strike has crippled South Africa's economy, costing mining companies more than $2 billion in lost revenue. The union is putting the agreement to its members, and it is not yet clear if they will accept the proposed offer. A July 10th determination from the Commerce Department could have serious implications for whether or not steel workers will retain family-supporting union jobs around the country. America's steel manufacturers and workers have joined forces to fight back against dumped imports of steel pipe used in the extraction of oil and natural gas reserves. The Alliance for American Manufacturing, a partnership between the United Steelworkers and leading steel manufacturers, for a thorough investigation of steel imports from South Korea being dumped on the U.S. market below cost. Scott Paul, president of the
always have disagreements, but they agreed that having a focus on the importance of manufacturing and good-paying jobs to our domestic economy was something that made a lot of sense. And we find that elected officials have nowhere to run when you bring in both the business side and the labor side to talk about a set of issues like we do. I think we've at least woken up the White House and Congress as to how important this is. Getting them to do something is another story.
AAM has been holding a nationwide series of Save Our Steel Jobs rallies. Learn more at AmericanManufacturing.org.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from Union-Owned Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender, doing whatever it takes to meet your business lending needs for new construction, remodeling, or building training facilities. Online at bankoflabor.com.
Workers Independent News provided by Diversified Media Enterprises.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, make sure you get the app, the Rick Smith Show app. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. For the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this campaign that the American Federation of Musicians out in California are going after. This idea that if we're giving tax credits to these production companies, the jobs should probably stay here. And the big news this week is the mayor of Los Angeles, this Eric Garcetti, announced that he was going to throw his support behind the AFM's Listen Up campaign, which says, you know what, if we're giving these tax breaks, the job should be here, which is why I've asked Mark Sazer. He's one of the musicians with the AFM. In fact, I found out and doing a little research about him, he actually did the score on a couple of my family's favorite movies. My wife's favorite movie, The Notebook, and my 5-year-old's new favorite, Rio 2, which we just saw the other day. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased that your daughter loves Rio 2. It was a great score to work on, and The Notebook was incredible fun to work on as well.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't even really think about so much about the music until you realize that it's a huge part, especially these kids' movies. It's a huge part of the story.
Well, the soundtrack to a movie that we worked on this past year, Frozen, has become one of the top-selling records, and the music is just an integral part of film storytelling as well as television storytelling. Imagine, for those of us who are old enough to remember Gilligan's Island without the song, or imagine, you say the name Jaws,
yep,
and everybody can feel the musical theme to that.
Yeah,
and so the music is an absolutely essential part of the creative process of creating a film or TV show, and we just wanted to be treated on the same level as actors, writers, directors, grips, carpenters, hairdressers, truck drivers, everybody else who participates in working on the movie.
But at the end of this, I mean, the reality is if we're giving these tax credits, I mean, just let's start with the economical part of this. Just from the common sense point of if we're investing all of this money because we want to keep the jobs here in the U.S., shouldn't they stay here? I mean, from top to bottom, shouldn't it benefit us on some level and not just the studios?
Well, that makes perfect sense. So we're looking at Lionsgate, which last year had revenues of $2.7 billion. And of that, they got something over $96 million of American tax credits from state A, B, C, and D. And I think they can afford to hire U.S.-based or U.S. or Canadian-based. I think they can afford to hire our musicians.
So where are they doing this stuff now? I mean, where is it going? Where are we outsourcing this stuff at right now then?
A certain amount of stuff is outsourced to London. They get dramatic tax breaks from the British government. But some of what Lionsgate does is even lower wage than that. The film Draft Day, which was as American as apple pie, it was about American football draft day. They had a $20 million budget. When it came time to do the music, they outsourced it to Macedonia at real third world wage level. And they got, in exchange for that, $5 million from the state of Ohio in tax credit. It doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right. And the other part of this is, we talk about, education, we talk about jobs and future careers, and thinking about it in the brain drain category of if we don't do this stuff here, eventually nobody does it anymore, and we eventually lose it. Just like a lot of machine trades. I mean, I grew up with kids who they learned to work on make metal into who knows what. Those jobs now are gone, and you don't have people who do this stuff anymore. I wonder what the future looks like if these jobs disappear. Do we still have kids?
I'm sorry, I think that's an incredibly powerful point, and it actually goes beyond that for workers in music and workers in the arts, where the recording jobs that shouldn't be outsourced, those jobs support U.S.-based and Canadian-based musicians who are not just going to work every day, they're teaching people's children, they're volunteering in schools, they're performing in opera and ballet and theater pits, they're playing in clubs, they're playing in music festivals, they're doing all the artistic things that don't make a living for anybody by themselves, that people can engage in and enrich our communities because the recording jobs subsidize that as part of the livelihood. So it really not only empowers us impoverishes us in the kind of brain drain you're correctly referring to, but it really reduces our cultural equity as a society.
Yeah, because I looked you up, just to get a little background, just a quick Google and looked at some of the things you've done, and really some very impressive work and on some really huge name movies. But as I was looking at it, I'm going, I don't know how you make a living doing this. I'm sure it's part of your living. So it's interesting to me that they're trying to take this away, and it keeps coming down to why. Is it just the money, or is it the beginning of trying to break unions as a whole in Hollywood?
I think that's the latter is what we're talking about. I think we're sort of the canaries in the coal mine. We really appreciate the fact that the mayor of Los Angeles has stepped up to support us and help us highlight this, and we have legislators both in California and in New York and in Atlanta. This is a national campaign. We have a growing number of political, labor, and cultural leaders who are willing to step up and say offshoring is wrong.
Now, Lionsgate just had really two huge franchise movies. Another one of my wife's favorite, the Twilight series, and of course the Hunger Games, which made huge amounts of box office money. So I can't imagine that the production company is hurting at all right now. I can't imagine that their CEO is taking pay cuts or anything like that.
Well, as a matter of fact, as I think I mentioned, Lionsgate's revenues last year were about $2.7 billion. And in fact, their CEO, John Feldheimer, got a substantial raise of some incredible percentage. His take-home pay last year was about $13 million. So yeah, no, I think they can afford to pay musicians.
So let me ask you this. I mean, because I guess the big question in the room is how much are they saving by outsourcing, by destroying your job and taking this portion of your living away? I mean, is it a huge amount? Is it enough to make up the $13 million that he's putting in his pocket? I mean, is this basically a theft from you to him?
It's a tiny fraction of that. The average percentage of a film budget that goes to musicians, no matter where they're hired, is in the 1% to 2% of the film budget. So it's really a trivial amount of cost to the production company. Certainly there are middlemen along the way that grab more out of it. So, my view is however it ends up looking to the company, they can afford to do the right thing. They're taking our tax dollars, and I think it's a fair thing for taxpayers as well as the American labor movement to expect them to be responsible employers and responsible members of the community.
Yeah, as someone who is a supporter of organized labor and workers having the right to collectively bargain, this to me is one of those moments where you go, an injury to you is an injury to me. If I allow you to go down, we're all eventually, because we're all in the Shark Tank in my view. It's just that you're the flavor of the month right now. So what can we do to help?
Well, I really appreciate that. First of all, I agree with you. The use of tax credits and other kinds of uses of tax dollars directly given to companies in order to make their profit, and not requiring that jobs be created in the communities where those tax dollars are flowing from, is a problem that goes throughout our society. So we really encourage people of goodwill to go to the Facebook page, Listen Up Now, to our website, listenupnow.org, and follow us on Twitter on Listen Up Now. Especially with media companies like Lionsgate, having a presence in social media can have a real big impact when they rely on the public goodwill to promote their movies and their TV shows. Then hearing from the public makes a difference to them.
And you can go to thericksmithshow.com and click on Mark Sazer's name. It'll take you right to the Listen Up website. And looking at this, you're focusing right now predominantly on Lionsgate. Are they the only bad actor in this? Are the other studios doing the right thing? Or is right now just the Lionsgate the focus?
Lionsgate is the focus right now. There are other independent studios that don't do the right thing by musicians in the United States and Canada, and their turn will come up next. And we're hoping that the entertainment industry can really sort of change its behavior on the street in terms of how it uses our tax dollars and scores its movies and TV shows.
And we can sign up and stand with the AFM members. There's a petition there, I understand, that you guys are putting together?
We had a fantastic delegation to Lionsgate Santa Monica, California headquarters, led by the the leader of the LA County Federation of Labor, Maria Elena Durazo. And we delivered with our organizing committee and some of our allies, including a city council member from the city of Santa Monica, over 12,000 signatures to Lionsgate's headquarters. And so we very much appreciate the support of all the people who've helped raise the issue and encourage Lionsgate to sit down and speak with the AFM.
Well, we do wish you nothing but the best, and if there's anything we can do here at the Rick Smith Show, you've got a friend here and an ally as this continues down the road, and we'd love to have you back and talk about it a little bit more. Before I let you go, though, the Frozen thing, I'm not happy with. Not happy at all.
Tell me.
I've got 3 kids and a wife that sing that damn song every single day.
Well, that was an AFM score on that movie. The musicians were treated appropriately. It was scored, right here in North America. It was done the right way. So sorry for your pain, but it's a good thing.
All right. Well, maybe in that vein, maybe I can forgive you. Mark, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Again, the website, listenupnow.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more mindless confusion. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for The World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The work week has come to a close, but it's decision time in Baghdad and Washington, and perhaps Tehran, as military planners try and think up a way to prevent Iraq from slipping into the hands of terrorists. After months of worsening violence, a group called ISIL, or the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, captured the cities of Mosul and Tikrit this week. The U.S. spent $25 billion training the Iraqi armed forces over the past decade, but in remarks today, President Barack Obama blamed their courage and the lack of focus among Iraq's leaders for the army's poor performance.
The fact that they are not willing to stand and fight and defend their posts against admittedly hardened terrorists, but not terrorists who are overwhelming in numbers, indicates that there's a problem with morale.
Given these issues, it's become clear that outside help will be needed to make a stand against ISIL. The U.S. is reportedly moving the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, which could be a sign the Pentagon is considering airstrikes. But Obama said today he'll need time to ponder his broader strategy.
Although events on the ground in Iraq have been happening very quickly, our ability to plan, whether it's military action or work with the Iraqi government on some of these political issues, is going to take several days. So people should not anticipate that this is something that is going to happen overnight.
According to media reports, the Iraqi government is said to be considering a military appeal to Iran if U.S. assistance doesn't materialize. The ironies of foreign policy. For more global news headlines, visit talkradio.news.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm an innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. That Frozen song, I can't get, my kids sing that song constantly. And to think, I had one of the guys who's responsible for it right here. But he's right. Look, it was done by people making a decent wage under decent conditions and done right here. And, I look at this scenario and go, it can be nothing more. You're talking about an extraordinarily profitable studio who's looking just to squeeze pennies more out. And you got to ask yourself, is that the kind of society that we want to live in? And for me, the big part of this is the brain drain that we talked about. If you don't have jobs for these folks, if they can't make a living, they do something else. And then you lose all of that comes with it. And it's like anything. Once you start picking away, and the studios understand this. It's all about the buck, man. It's all about how much they can put in their pockets and take out of yours. So when you see the CEO got a 90% raise or something obnoxious, where'd that money come from? Big part of it came out of, hey, let's steal it from those folks. And to me, it's just more of what we're seeing going on across the country. And of course, if you want more information, listenupnow.org, the website for the American Federation of Musicians, Listen Up campaign. We got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. That'll help you get there as well. Interesting story I came across. The BBC reported that the recession led to 10,000 more suicides, extra, above and beyond what they would normally expect in the time following during the recession. They say that many of the deaths have been avoidable, could have been avoidable, as there were some countries that showed no increase because what they had done is they had stabilized their economy, and you didn't have the massive drop in standard of living. You didn't have the massive, or as Pat Toomey would say, the harder down. And the study was published in the Business Journal of Psychiatry, showed suicides have risen markedly. And is it any surprise that in countries that had the high unemployment rates, suicides came along with it? Is it any surprise that as the misery index goes up, suicide rate goes with it? Is anybody surprised in this? Because you shouldn't be. And here, what we're seeing, and I remember talking about when the Republicans ran home after Christmas and didn't extend unemployment benefits. And I remember asking the question, what happens to those folks who, that's their lifeline, that's the last line they've got. Now they start losing their homes. Now they end up in the streets. Now the water, the lights, things are shut off. Cars are being repossessed. All of these really negative things start to happen. And it's societally what happens. Of course, you have higher rates of depression, and with it, higher rates of suicide. Something our mainstream corporate-controlled media not so interested in. Bringing out actual facts, not something really all that interested in. In fact, there was an interesting little tidbit over at the blog, the Too Much Online blog, that pointed out how well our media, how well they've been doing in pointing out poverty. In fact, in the last 14 months, according to Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, their study showed that the three big TV networks spent an average of 2.7 seconds on their 22-minute nightly newscast talking about poverty, stories about the poor, stories about unemployment. All of 2.7 seconds of that 22-minute nightly news program. Over that same period, those same networks carried 4 times as many stories about billionaires. How wonderful they are, how we love them. They're just fantastic. Thank goodness for our 485 billionaires. Thank goodness. Never mind those more than 50 million people living in poverty. Then screw them. Let them get jobs. Because, as Pennsylvania State Senator Wagner said about those lazy
But there are a
unemployed.
couple things required. Number one, you would have to have an alarm clock. And you would have to be able to get out of bed. You would be able to have to pass a drug test, and you would have to have some work ethic.
Yeah, because everyone's just they're lazy, they're drug addicts, and they're just pathetic. All those unemployed people, they're all the same. Want handouts? Do you believe that? I mean, honestly, do people actually buy that? Because that's what we're constantly inundated with. Our mainstream media, 2.7 seconds per broadcast over a 14. Really? At a time when poverty is rising, at a time when inequality has never been greater, at a time when the billionaire class is pocketing so much more than. Really? I just find it, I find it rather distressing. And, I find it, wrong. And all we hear is the negative. We don't hear about poverty. We don't hear about homelessness. We don't hear about the things that affect real people every day in our communities. And we also don't hear about some of the good things that we're doing. I mean, I look at the Affordable Care Act. Look, there are things in it that I would like to see changed at some point. But what we're finding out is it's actually working. It is. You're now at more than 7 million people, really close to the 8.02 million people that they originally thought would sign up for the exchanges. They're about 90%. And people are paying their first premiums. Even though you heard the Republicans saying, they're never going to do it, it's going to be a huge failure. It's actually working. And in fact, Obamacare is cutting the rate of uninsured. You look at New Jersey, for instance, cut the rate of uninsured by 38%. Minnesota cut the rate of uninsured by 40%. Kentucky cut the rate of the uninsured in half. California, more than 60% cut in the uninsured. And here in Pennsylvania, we've got a governor who refuses to accept the Medicaid expansion, which could help cut our uninsured rate. But here again, that's ideology. It's not about how do we have a society that helps one another. And for me, these kind of moves forward, these kind of steps forward are so important. And it's so important that you and I, we stand up and say, you know what? We care about our neighbors. We care about society. We're going to stand with our brothers and sisters. We're going to stand together. Even in the face of overwhelming media opposition. Now, over the next couple of weeks, we're just going to be inundated with Iraq. Other things are going to be pushed to the side, and the business community is thrilled. The whole push for a decent wage, a $15 an hour minimum wage, that's gonna take a backseat. Now we can't afford that now. No, because we got war in to do. Sad. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Obviously, we came up short.
GOP leader Eric Cantor defeated by climate denier, who doesn't want you to know he's a climate denier. And for good reason.
The argument is not about climate change. The argument is about the best means to respond to climate change.
Australia broils in its hottest 2 years on record, but their prime minister is a global warming skeptic. Historic heat brings riots to India, plus Tesla is giving away its secrets for free.
All of those secrets and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We cannot lose the coal industry, folks. What will we give to naughty kids on Christmas?
This is your Green News Report.
A stocking full of wind? Come on.
Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, big news from Tesla, who says they're giving away their technology to the world for free. The electric car company who makes these fantastic cars. Really?
Yes, they're going open source. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced that his company will, quote, not initiate patent lawsuits against anyone who in good faith wants to use our technology. That means that if other car companies want to produce electric cars, they can use Tesla's technology to do it and advance Musk's dream of electric vehicles everywhere.
That's amazing, actually. I hope others take him up on it, and I hope he can be trusted that he won't sue them when they do. Hey.
Well, first, an historic record heat wave in India is bringing the nation to the breaking point, causing rioting over widespread blackouts and hundreds of deaths. Temperatures have held at more than 110 degrees for nearly 3 weeks now in northern India, with some areas hitting 120 degrees. Overnight temperatures in Mumbai this week did not drop below 110 degrees. At midnight.
Wow, and the rioting that comes with it is, again, exactly what not only scientists but defense experts here in the U.S. have been warning us about for so long.
Yeah, that it will lead to unrest. Now, climate scientists say that this heat wave already bears the fingerprint of human-caused global warming. They predict that these extreme temperatures could become the new normal in coming decades. Down under in Australia, they're in the midst of one of their hottest autumns on record in the Southern Hemisphere, and they just announced that the last 2 years in Australia were Australia's hottest 2 years on record, and that trend is also projected to get worse with global warming. But sorry, Australia, your Conservative Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, is a climate change skeptic who repealed Australia's landmark carbon tax.
I believe that carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes are the wrong way to go. The right way to go is to take sensible steps to improve energy efficiency, to cultivate better soils, to plant more trees, to take the kind of direct action measures which we certainly intend to take in Australia.
Abbott is traveling in the U.S. on his first official visit this week. He says he and Canadian Prime Minister David Cameron are committed to increasing their country's fossil fuel exports, and therefore they oppose any strong international agreement to reduce the carbon emissions that cause global warming.
Yes, anything but charging more money to industry. Nonetheless, in that debate, I think it's a legitimate one. At least he's not out there saying, no, global warming doesn't exist. There's nothing we need to do about it. At least he's recognizing that there's a problem. Now the debate is about what to do about it, which, frankly, is where the debate ought to be.
Yes, but he does favor only voluntary controls for polluting industries, which his own scientists say will do absolutely nothing.
Oh, well, he has the right to be wrong, but, at least he's not crazy.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., in the shocking reported primary election loss of Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor this week, it's no surprise that his Tea Party-backed challenger David Brat is a climate change denier who spouts myths like scientists predicted an ice age in the 1970s, which of course isn't true. Scientists didn't say that.
But Time magazine said so on the cover, so I guess that counts.
But it was never a scientific consensus.
In fact, at the same time, way more scientists had warned about warming rather than cooling back then. But press on.
We'd play you the audio of Brat denying global warming, but once Mother Jones reported on his science denial, all of his YouTube videos were suddenly pulled and set to private. Somebody doesn't want you to know he's a climate science denier.
And why would that be?
Because new public policy polling shows American voters have very little tolerance for denier politicians. A new PPP poll finds not only are President Obama's new carbon emission standards for power plants very popular with the vast majority of Americans, but also the same poll finds more Americans than ever say they won't vote for any presidential candidate in 2016 who doesn't believe that climate change is caused by human activity.
That's a whole lot of people who won't be voting for whoever wins the Republican primary for president in 2016. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we could not get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Remember, you can download us anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, where we hope you'll give us a good review to help other people find us as well. Plus, follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I gotta tell you, I cannot wait for the 2016 presidential race to heat up. I can't wait to see who the new Snow White's going to be, since Michelle Bachmann hasn't said if she's going to be jumping back. I still think it's the woman from Tennessee, that Marsha Blackburn. I think she's going to be the new Snow White. Just as crazy, but just as crazy, I think. Lots of fun. Rick Perry, I'm sure, going to throw his name into it. Had an interesting quote this week about gay people being like alcoholics. He said that I may have the genetic coding that I'm inclined to be an alcoholic, but I have the desire not to do that. And I look at the homosexual issue the same way. And, in thinking about that, I bet you he'd be a much better human being if he were an alcoholic. He sure was fun in New Hampshire. Whatever he was hopped up on there, that sure was fun. So it'll be interesting to see where Ricky takes us. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. Maybe it'd be better if he was alcoholic and then became gay. Not
a matter of becoming gay. There's still rumors that he.
No, he's becoming gay. You got to understand. You can turn that off and on.
Oh, like the switch, right? I got it.
Or what he says.
Yeah.
Alcohol's the same way.
Yeah, no, although I've got some friends who live in Texas who evidently rumors abound. I'm not going to jump in the middle of that because there's nothing in my view wrong with it. So if that's the way you want to be, that's the way. Just don't be a hypocrite about it.
I put his quote out. I found it fascinating. At first, I wasn't going to cross to our news service because just not to give him any attention. But I thought, put it out just so people can actually see that because. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and just forget the gay side of what he said for a second, and when you read what he said about the alcohol side, it's as ludicrous as what he said about the gay side. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. Well,
and you put the drink in your mouth and you can stop that. There's a whole recovery process, and you're prone to it or you're not. And then with the gay issue, he's sort of saying that you might be genetically disposed, but you can just stop that.
Yeah, you just turn it right off and on. Yeah. And you know what I found interesting? Over the weekend, I was talking to somebody this past weekend about Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I knew nothing about his personal life, but evidently, according to this person that was telling me the story, he had one sip of beer at a closing party after like 15 or 18 years of sobriety, and he had one sip, and that started
32 years of sobriety.
Okay.
23 years of sobriety, and I brought this up at a recovery meeting after he passed away because people said, well, he died of heroin. Yes, he died of heroin, but what brought it on was a sip of beer at an after party after all of those years.
So the story. And I had someone telling me this over the weekend, and I'm going, that's just remarkable. And for someone who doesn't have that, to have something like. Maybe it just shows ignorance, like this guy showing here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because one is too many, and 1,000 is not enough.
Yeah.
If you're addicted, and that's what we always say. One is too many, 1,000 is not enough. And I pointed out at the recovery meetings, if you think you can go ahead and go back and do this stuff, he didn't go back out on heroin. He decided after 20-some years. He was going to have a drink at the after party. He could control it. After all, it had been 20-some years. That led to getting drunk. He drank for a week, and then he did the shoot-up, and then he died.
Wow. That's horrible. It's just horrible when you look at it.
Terrible.
Let's find out what's going on in the news. What's going on with the veterans?
Well, there's the Sanders-McCain bill, I guess we'll call it. John McCain was trying to block this thing at first, but then he's come back around. It'll put in $50-some billion into the VA. It's going to go through the House, the Senate. It's making its way through the system. The conference will go fast between the two chambers. It'll go on to President Obama, and it will do a few other things. Now, it's going to have the money in the system, so it does. Even, the hawks like McCain on the money went along with it. And then it allows for upper management to be fired, which there was some, I don't know why they couldn't anyway, but it allows for upper management to be fired. But it makes a lot of changes within the system, looks at the waiting list. It also ends up, it allows for some private care. If you don't have something near you, you'll go somewhere else and the government will pay for it. So that's an important, part of it in there. But at the end of the day, Rick, it's going to take a good appointment by the president to, make this be carried out.
Yeah. How much of this is our over the last several years, budgets have been slashed, and really since the Clinton years, we've been slashing federal funding for upgrading of equipment. And I have a friend who works over at the Department of Treasury here in Pennsylvania. And she was telling me that when she first started the job, they wanted to have like this web hookup with this webinar with a number of different agencies. And they were told that by the company that did this, there's just no way, because evidently the equipment that they were using at the Department of Treasury is so outdated that they can't interface today's stuff with, well, the great grandparents of today's technology. How much of what we're seeing at the VA is the fact that we're using antiquated systems and the resources just aren't there?
Well, I'll go back to 2000 or 1995. I was on the Veterans Committee, by the way, the House Veterans Committee, when I entered Congress. We had trouble back then to get the automation down, to get the computer systems working, to get them talking. So you had veterans who were going to Milwaukee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and they were just trying to get their benefits due to them, their benefits.
Right.
Forget the health care for a second, their benefits. And it would end up that, Rick, there were waiting lists of 2.5 years. 2.5 years. And they weren't automated. They couldn't pull your records. You had to get records from elsewhere. That type of thing really hasn't been corrected. So the money was never spent over a series of years. There's systemic problems built in. Then you throw in the hideous thing that happened with the waiting list and drug all this stuff out public.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing that we have to remember is there's 1,400 some veterans facilities. Everybody thinks there's 153 VA hospitals. There are 1,400 facilities, clinics, outpatient care, nursing homes, hospitals, all types of different facilities. If you're going to have that many, you either have to fund them or you say to the veterans, just go into the regular system and we'll pay for it. But this country said to veterans, you go serve, we take care of your health care. That's what they said.
Yeah. No.
Now they have to do it.
Yeah. No. In fact, I was just talking to a guy today. He's in his early 70s, and he just got his notice saying that, because he's just about to retire, that they're going to cover certain things, but not other things. Like they won't cover any dental or any vision or anything like that. But his back and his hips and stuff from the time that he served, they're going to cover some of that, which I found very, very interesting.
Yes, and again, we've made these commitments, and we have to hold to them. It's going to take money into the system, but there were budget cuts, and so, people say, well, we have to balance the nation's budget. That's correct. But, if you promise somebody something for sure, and you go, in this case, go lay your life on the line, you have to fund the money.
Yeah, and if you're the guy who stood up there for a photo op and took the picture saying, oh, you're our heroes, and put these folks up on a platform, you should be the first ones out there making sure that you're taking care of them. And I look at the people who are in Congress now and the people who were there when we were sending them off to war. We're all in favor of it. Why weren't they? Why haven't they been all of this time pushing for this stuff? Why is it just now? Oh, because I think it's politically advantageous. But why now instead of all of the time prior? That's what gets me.
Because we've known of these cases. We knew.
Of course we have.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago of certain things going on anyway. And this isn't the first VA scandal.
Nope.
There have been other things. If you look through, the internet, one finds all kinds of things.
Yeah. So let's move on. The Bergdahl thing is he back? Is he coming back tomorrow? When's he back?
Yes, he's heading back as we speak, and he will be back in America. And of course, you can imagine wherever they have him, you can imagine the media is going to be camped out there 24/7, hoping to at some point in time get a peek at him or talk to him. But there's all kinds of stories now. He's talking to his family or he's not talking to his family. I mean, no one really knows. But he is headed back to America. And of course, Chuck Hagel, Secretary of Defense, came out front, on this whole issue, and has now, I think, has done a fairly decent job of putting the administration's position out there and where they stand on it.
Yeah, for me, I don't care what he did or where he was. You bring your soldiers home, and I don't care. I've had so many people say, "Well, it was a bad deal. We shouldn't be trading. We shouldn't be dealing with that." No, you bring your people home. That's it. Everything else we can argue about. You bring your people home.
Yeah, Hagel had taken some tough grilling, but again, I think he held himself in pretty capable hands, and also he's the out front guy because, frankly, on a political basis, district they just took Susan Rice, ambassador to UN, just took her, or NSA director now. They took her out of this, and they're letting Hagel. He's a former senator, and he did get a horrible grilling when he got his appointment. But I think his Secretary of Defense has been pretty well respected.
Yeah. What'd you think of the other day's election in Virginia with Cantor going down? Were you surprised by it?
Shocked. Surprised is not even the word. I served with Eric Cantor. I remember the first day he came to the House. He was immediately part of the leadership, first day, with Tom DeLay's whip team. There were 13 deputy whips, of which I was one of them, so I served as a deputy whip with Cantor. I was in meetings with him, and I watched this with, when it came up on our screen from Talk Radio News, I actually sent an email, because I thought they had messed something up. I really did. But when you look at this and break it all the way down, there's multiple reasons he lost. The immigration is something that those who do not want immigration have fed this stuff. And I'm talking about some of the corporate media.
Right.
Has fed this stuff out here that, he lost. He dared to dip his toe into the immigration issue, and he was a, quote, squish on immigration, and you see what happened to him. The actual truth is more people in his district in Virginia and his state want immigration reform than the average American by 12 points. 72% of the people want it versus the 60%, in America. So it may have cost him a few votes here and there, but it surely didn't take him out. But now the Republicans are saying, "Oh, we can't do immigration. Oh no, oh my goodness." But yet there are, thousands and thousands of young people who are entering this country, and they're here. And they're growing. So eventually, something's going to have to happen.
Yeah, I think pure and simply lost because he was arrogant. When you're in a swanky restaurant in D.C. on the night of your primary, I just think that sends the wrong message.
Well, sure it does. And the other thing is when you're when you're doing fundraising, which I did, I ran across America. I do it in L.A., Pittsburgh. I can name you all the cities. But I have to tell you something. When the fundraiser's done, I was back home going to a county fair where I was walking a parade, where I was at the festival. And when I got in trouble back in 2006, I still won my primary with 69% of the vote, spending very little money. Eric Cantor probably spent $5 million. His opponent spent 100-some thousand. So he also got Washingtonized. And I think he also fell victim to Speaker John Boehner. The way he has run the House, Eric's his number 2 right-hand guy. And, a lot of people aren't happy, whether they're to the right, left, or in the middle with Boehner. So, multitude of things. And a lot of constituents said that, he just became Washingtonized, forgot them. And you make the best point. You're united, you're primary, you're in a D.C. restaurant.
Yeah, if you're not kissing babies and shaking hands, you've got problems. So who's going to be his replacement? To me, this looks like an opportunity, and something that kind of has me a little concerned that you really get one of these radical Tea Party people, like a couple of those representatives from Texas, like Sessions or Harshlinger, or however you pronounce his name. I guess McCarthy's the inside guy. What do you think?
McCarthy has it. Hands down, he's the next majority leader. Done deal. Finished.
Oh, okay.
Now the question is, who's going to be, the replacement for McCarthy. He's number 3. And by the way, you started out, it's very interesting. When I was listening to your promo here, and I was just, when you said Marsha Blackburn, well, some people talk about Marsha Blackburn jumping up that leadership. So you kind of hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, you've got to have, Snow White's got to come out. There's going to have to. There's got to be another crazy woman to help push it along. Because I still think, and I've been predicting that the Republicans will come out with a female VP in 2016, one way or another.
They have to. Up against Hillary Clinton. Now they can talk about Benghazi or her recent statement about poverty or whatever they want to talk about. If they don't have a female, at least, I mean, if I were running the Republican Party, I would have a female at the top of the ticket running for president. Period. End of the discussion. But they at least have to have a vice presidential female, not Sarah Palin.
I don't see a woman being the top of the Republican ticket, but I think that part of me says that Susana Martinez from New Mexico may be the person that, because you bring some of the immigrant vote possibly with you. That's just my way far out look at things. Let's move along. What's going on in Iraq? Evidently things are not going well.
Meltdown, total, absolute religious civil war.
Yeah.
It's the Shiite government of Maliki, the prime minister, versus the Sunni minority. They just came out of nowhere. Cities are taken under siege. It's complete chaos. I mean, there is an absolute, well, the Mideast is on fire, period, and there's a meltdown in Iraq. Now, Iran has made some overtures, actually, maybe to help the Iraqi government, which would be very interesting because we've been talking to Iran. Iran may become a better friend of ours than we even imagined at some point in time here in the near future. But Iraq is really in horrific trouble, and they're asking point blank for us to do airstrikes with our F-16s, military airstrikes, and the president has said no. He may consider some drone activity. He's asking for an involvement of the United Nations on Iraq, which is a lot smarter than us dropping bombs from F-16.
Yep.
But it's just, I don't know what can be done. And now, of course, John Boehner said, quote, that President Obama was taking a nap on Iraq. Now, if you look at Iraq, a very, very important date is in 2003, not 2014. There was a man, and a lot of people may not know this name. His name's Paul Bremer. And this guy was the dictator of Iraq, an American dictator of Iraq. He was the official proclaimed governor of Iraq. He dismantled 400,000 people in the military and the police.
Yep.
He called them Baathists, and he sent them around the country loose, unemployed, with guns and weapons because he didn't trust them. He disbanded the entire of Iraq. So if we want to do some finger pointing, President Obama, said that he would take us out of Iraq during the election. People voted for him, and he did that. So I don't know how the NAP thing is being said by Speaker Boehner, because Iraq got disarmed back in 2003 and has never, ever recovered.
Exactly. And that was even then everyone was saying that was really a dumb idea.
Oh, awful.
And well, I guess it all comes down to, hey.
Now remember, Paul Bremer's the guy that lost, what, $4 billion?
Yeah. Skids. It was $8 billion, I thought. $8 billion in skids.
You're probably right.
Shrink wrap skids of cash. They just lost. I wonder how you do that.
I don't know. Maybe Switzerland?
Yeah. Just absolutely amazing stuff. But we will see how this continues on down the road.
Right.
Bob, always great talk with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you.
Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
If you're an upper-class, uber-rich Brit, the price of being blessed with such wealth and social standing is that you're expected to be at least slightly amusing to the general public, offering some combination of doofus, daffy, and scandalous. Crispin Odey does not disappoint. He was born to old money, but most of it was lost by the time he came of age. So Crispin set out with old-fashioned drive and the help of some very wealthy old-school backers to make a new fortune. As a London hedge fund huckster, he has scored big during Europe's ongoing financial crisis by making socially useful investments, such as betting that British banks would collapse. They did. Ordinary Brits suffered, and Crispin became a billionaire. That's what hedge fund geniuses do. Of course, he now lives in a proper British mansion, but Odie is not satisfied to wallow selfishly in the wealth he raked in from his bets on the misfortunes of the masses. Rather, he's boosting the local economy by hiring architects, artisans, construction crews, and designers to build a very special $250,000 house on his estate. In so doing, he's also boosting the spirit of an entire nation caught in an economic slump. Indeed, Crispin has ignited the fiery spirit of populist outrage in merry old England. Why? Because the $250,000 house he has commissioned is a chicken coop. Yes, a full-scale stone structure of about 6,000 square feet, designed as a Grecian temple, complete with 24 columns and carved flourishes around the roof, all for chickens. Adding to the merriment, a chicken and egg are carved into one wall with a Latin inscription asking, "Who came first?" This is Jim Hightower saying the answer to that one is easy. Like billionaires everywhere, Crispin always puts himself first. The common people and the common good be damned.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'll send an SOS to the world. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. They're setting up on...
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. You gotta love when crazy people try to play the underdog. And I saw this story about Tony Perkins. He's the head of the euphemistically named Family Research Council. They're one of these. I hesitate to call them Christian. I hesitate to give them that much credit. But they're one of these groups that claims to espouse their version of Christian values. That's probably a way of putting it. Anyway, they do a podcast radio kind of program that, yeah, I think it's pretty far out there. But anyway, this Tony Perkins had this Nicole Martin on, and she's an attorney with the Alliance Alliance Defending Freedom. One of these nicely euphemistically named groups. She was one of the attorneys that defended this Jack Phillips, the guy in Colorado who owned this bakery, who refused to sell a cake to a gay couple and turned them away specifically because, well, you're gay and I don't believe in you and you're going to hell. And blah, blah, blah. So, of course, they took him to court, and it found that this guy violated these folks' civil rights, and now all of this stuff that's coming out of it, you're going to have sensitivity training and all this stuff, has got the right wing all just in a tizzy. And this Alliance Defending Freedom is one of those groups, along with this so-called Family Research Council. But Tony Perkins kind of flips this in a very interesting way. He basically asks this woman if what we're seeing is the Holocaust for Christians. He says, I'm beginning to think, are re-education camps next? When are we going to start rolling out the boxcars and start hauling off Christians? And she goes into this whole answer about a witch hunt and all this stuff. And you got to love this whole, we're the underdogs. We're the persecuted. And look, if you're going to hang out a shingle in this country, reality is business is what it is. We have pushed this non-religious for quite some time. But these folks are the ones they're trying to change that. They want us to be fully a theocracy. So I thought it'd be interesting to throw that out there. Let you just think about it for a little while. Anyway, great program tonight. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate the emails, the interaction. Always appreciate that. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Tomorrow, we're going to be at the Building Common Ground Pennsylvania forum. Number of panel discussions, number of opportunities to interact with folks who have varying ideas. This is the coming together of all ideas. In fact, Senators Rob Teplitz and Pat Vance will be there. Teplitz, the Democrat, Vance, the Republican, talking about, hey, how do we forge equal opportunity? How do we protect the environment? I'll be there to talk about labor issues. My good friend Mark Price will be there to talk about inequality. So it'll be an interesting mix. I'm sure there's going to be some opposing ideas as well. I think these forums are important, so I hope folks will come out to Dickinson College's Law School, 333 West South Street, at the law school there, and come out and participate in an opportunity to talk to your neighbors and talk about ideas. Again, thanks for being here. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Get the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or in us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming.